College Football Playoff Selection Day is presented by AT&T.
Who's in takes a back seat to who do you play, where do you play them, and where are you ranked. When the final clock hit 0 on Championship Saturday, order had triumphed over chaos. It doesn't mean that there wasn't drama. A Spartan team that had been exhorted all season long to reach higher instead needed to reach farther by about that much, and did. Clemson's been #1 from the start, and they finished the deal. Fought off a frenzied comeback, stayed on sides, and finished as the only perfect team in the country. But perfect enough to hold off Alabama's bid for the top spot? And what about Oklahoma? A spot secured, but the question is, which one? Who's in? That has a highly likely answer. All of the other questions will be unveiled shortly. College Football Playoff Selection Day starts right now.
This is where the debate has been settled, where the decision has been made, and where the season has been considered.
We'll look back at this as the turning point.
The opportunity was there.
The day has come. The games have been played. The arguments made.
Your resume matters.
It's fun to get excited. It's fun for people to yell at each other.
He's got running room. Touchdown!
The decision now final. Only 4 teams continue.
His record speaks for itself.
You better be ready to defend your picks.
On the playoff path to the ultimate goal. After all the chatter and bluster on the outside, it's inside this room where just 12 voices have determined, are you in?
"12 voices." It's just like a jury. Jeff Long has led this group to decide the fate of the teams who will be in the college football playoff, doubtless relying on the football expertise of guys like Dr. Tom Osborne. You see Barry Alvarez earlier in the room as well. Resumes, bodies of work, eye test, football judgment, all part of the equation to determine who will be among the 4 teams vying to get to the championship game on January 11th. In Glendale, Arizona. It'll be on ESPN at 8:30 Eastern Time. The College Football Playoff National Championship presented by AT&T. We have a really good idea of which 4 teams will be in. Look how relaxed they are in Norman, Oklahoma. The Sooners didn't even have to play on Championship Saturday. They know they've done enough. They're waiting to find out where they will be. Will it be Dallas or will it be in South Florida? Michigan State with a thrilling victory against Iowa with a drive for the ages to finish off the deal in the Big Ten Championship. Having a little sustenance. Looks like we're working on some wings there in East Lansing.
Refueling.
Yeah, gotta get ready. That was a long drive. Those offensive guys are probably tired. And look at the scene.
That's the way you do it.
Only undefeated team in the country.
Oh, a pizza party.
And
Hey, the Guinness record, largest pizza party.
I've got our research staff working on that right now. The big pizza party that Dabo Swinney promised, win or lose, obviously. That's the difference in having meat lovers and pepperoni as opposed to having like some kind of veggie pizza.
Yeah,
you have
something
to choke
Pollock
down
would
if
like.
you got it. Yeah.
Tofu.
That's right. And we'll hear from all of these guys you're hearing from on the set. We have reporters all over the place. Tom Rinaldi with #1 Clemson. Tuscaloosa, Alabama is where Kaylee Hartung is. Samantha Ponders in Norman, Oklahoma. And Marty Smith is in East Lansing with Michigan State. We don't know which order these teams are going to be in. Rinaldi's with the only team that finished with a perfect record. So, Tom, I'm assuming that there is a slice of pepperoni with your name on it. What's it like there in Clemson right now as the Tigers await to see where they're going?
Reese, this all came from an idea that Dabo Swinney mentioned when the first college football rankings came out. He said, wouldn't it be great to have a pizza party? And he said it took on a life of its own. Take a listen to the life roaring behind me. 20,000 strong here at Clemson Memorial Stadium. 2,500 pizzas provided by Papa John's, cut into 8 slices. 10 different franchises, 5 different towns, all feeding and serving the frenzy of Clemson faithful here. All Dabo Swinney's brainchild to say, we're going to celebrate whether we win or lose. Obviously, it's going to taste a lot better here because they're going to celebrate it as a conference champion. Dabo Swinney will address this crowd shortly. If there were a roof on the building, it would come off. They're really here ready to celebrate. We'll hear from Dabo a little bit later on. They're ready to eat, and they're still hungry here in Clemson.
To gobble up 2 more wins, they hope, Tommy, they'll start and find out who they go up against coming up in a matter of moments. Now let's now go down to Tuscaloosa, where Kaylee Hartung is there. Alabama back-to-back SEC champions. Crimson Tide, we are certain, will be in the playoff for the 2nd straight year, Kaylee.
Well, Reese, we're here in Tuscaloosa, but there is just not much to see. I know it is so cliche to say, but it is business as usual in Tuscaloosa, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. We've seen a couple members of the staff trickle in this morning. We had to turn the lights on for ourselves when we came in at about 5 a.m. to the facility. And Nick Saban is on his way here now. He went to church this morning. He held a recruiting breakfast at his home. He's got a staff meeting he'll hold at 12 Central here. Now, there's no pizza party here, not even a watch party for the team, and when Alabama's playoff fate is announced, we don't even know how many members of the Alabama football team will be watching. That's because plenty of them could still be sleeping. They got back to Tuscaloosa last night around 10 p.m. local, and they don't have to be into the facility until 2 p.m. this afternoon. So sleep may be a very precious commodity they need at this point. Last year, when they did have a watch party, Nick Saban told his team before they found out they were the number 1 ranked team, act like you've been there before. Well, now they've been there before. There's no acting here, Reese.
Kaylee, they're the only team that has, and by the way, just to clear up one thing, everybody watches the college football playoff.
Absolutely.
Selection day. Let's go to Norman now and Samantha Ponder. Sam, Bob Stoops isn't with his team right now. He's in New York City. The Sooners know that they'll be in. What's it like there in Norman?
Yeah, that was what was a little bit different today, of course, because everyone was expecting the faces that you're most used to seeing at OU, that being Bob Stoops and Baker Mayfield. Like you said, Bob Stoops is in New York for the National Football Foundation event, which is inducting Brian Bosworth into the Hall of Fame, but also Baker Mayfield, a guy who is up for an award, the Walk-On of the Year. I think it's the Burlsworth Award that is in Arkansas. He is on his way there. So think about this, a guy who is possibly up for the Heisman is also up for the Walk-On of the Year award. So the guys are here behind me. There are supposed to be about 200 guys here today just hanging out. They had brunch together, now sitting around waiting. They've done more waiting than anybody else, of course, because they already won the Big 12 championship. So this weekend, all they've done is sit around and wait. And now it's just about that time, Reese.
Sammy, that was one of the more impressive performances of the weekend. That was an outstanding job of blocking out that background noise, of hearing her own voice about 8 seconds later. That was outstanding. I salute you for that. That was pretty loud in the background there. You're doing a great job.
Sam getting the Herb Street seal of approval to get things started on Selection Day. On the banks of the Red Cedar, there is Marty Smith there where, Marty, Michigan State has already won a de facto playoff game, winning a national quarterfinal in the waning seconds. That's their M.O. That's how they win these days, to beat Iowa, and they presume make their way into the field.
Reese, thank you, sir. I'm in the room with the Spartans right now, and head coach Mark D'Antonio has had very clear messaging all year long. Of course, we want to win the Big Ten championship. That's a goal every year, but our goals this year are loftier. We want a national championship in East Lansing. Riley Bulla, linebacker, said he and his teammates talk about it every day amongst themselves. Over my right shoulder, you will see a wall with placards on it. Each one of those placards represents one of Michigan State's opponents in 2015. Typically, players sign those placards after victories, but over the last 2 weeks, Coach D'Antonio has had them sign them before they ever take the field of play. Why? Accountability. Own it. Be it. Put your name on it. Well, here in a bit, they put their name on the Iowa placard, and that means these men have put their name on the college football playoff in 2015, Reese.
Antonio has pushed all of the right buttons, Marty. We'll hear from these guys as the selections are unveiled. Now, our strength of record metric, the ESPN has divided. Let me explain this to you if you're not familiar. It's a backward-looking measure of how strong a team's record is given their opponent. So it takes into account how good the teams you've played are. Clemson and Alabama, around a 2% chance for an average top 25 team to achieve the records they did. These are the top 4 teams in strength of record. Will that necessarily reflect the way they are seeded by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee? This is different from FPI, which is a forward-looking measure. This looks back, so the resumes are clearly strong of the 4 teams that we expect to be in the College Football Playoff. Glad to have you with us on Selection Day. Reese Davis, Joey Galloway, David Pollack, and Kirk Herbstreit. Several others will join us throughout. And as a reminder, as we do every Tuesday night when the rankings are revealed, we haven't seen them yet. So you will see them when we do. Obviously, our graphics operator, Eric, when he gets that, he'll type them up, and then we'll get them out there to you. I feel like that we're only going to have controversy if somehow these aren't the 4 teams. What are you wanting to see?
Well, I think everybody, after the results last night, we all agree that these are the 4. And it's funny, you either debate, is there a chance that Bama could go past Clemson at the top, or is there a chance at the bottom you could see Oklahoma and Michigan State flip? I think it's the latter, if there's anything at all. I mean, you would think because it was chalk yesterday, there's a chance you're going to see the same 4 as last week with Clemson and Alabama and Oklahoma, and then the Big Ten winner, Michigan State. But has Michigan State done enough for the committee to look at the entire body of work? Not yesterday. That was a great win against Iowa. The entire body of work, beating Ohio State in Columbus, knocking off a great Oregon team is the way the season ended. Michigan and Ann Arbor. And that non-conference schedule matters. I just wonder if Michigan State's done enough to go from 4 to 3. To me, that's the only drama as we sit here right now, really.
Yeah, and it's drama, but it's fun because one of the criteria they've outlined for us to look at is head-to-head, and another one is whether you win a championship. And yesterday, Michigan State got that opportunity. They won their championship game, played an extra game.
Yep.
I feel they should be rewarded, and I feel like they should be in that 3 spot. So that's the only thing that, for me, you also beat the number 4 team in the country. It's not like you didn't beat somebody good. So Michigan State, I think, earned the right to be in that 3 spot, but that's the only drama. You're right. I think Clemson's locked at number 1, and then I think
Bama's
look
at
at Michigan State.
Now, I don't even know why you really have to stop at number 3. If the committee is really resetting, and Reese, you've preached this to me every single time we've done the show, if you reset and just look at the resume, I don't know who has a better resume than Michigan State and what they've done at the end. When you think of Ohio State, Michigan, and then Iowa now, all those top
Oregon
teams, Oregon also, if you truly reset, Michigan State could come out anywhere from 2 to 4 in this situation because their resume has been that strong at the end.
But Reese, I was going to say it's a big deal for fans. It's a big deal. If 3 and 4 switch, you're talking about changing the whole thing as far as matchups.
Yeah, it's a difference in the matchup. I think one of the interesting things about how the committee will evaluate this is I agree with you guys about Michigan State. Maybe Clemson's wins are as good. Their 3 wins would be top 10, top 12 type wins. But Michigan State also has on the flip side the eye test. How they won the Michigan game. They only beat Purdue by 3. Rutgers spiked the ball, spiked the ball on 4th down. The Indiana game was a 5-point game with 5 minutes to go. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I'm saying if they don't move them, it'll be because of things like that.
That's very fair. And I guess if I were, and I'm not sitting here trying to state a case for Michigan State, but if you're looking in this discussion about what Michigan State's done, what a different team in the last 4 weeks.
No doubt.
Darian Hicks gets back. He's healthy, overcomes his injuries and what he's dealing with earlier. They moved Demetrius Cox from corner to safety. Monte Nicholson playing better. These last 4 weeks, it's kind of the Michigan State you'd expect to see. So I think early in the year when you're starting 3 true freshmen in the secondary in Lincoln, Nebraska, that's a different team than the team we've seen over the last 4 weeks.
The defense creating turnovers. You're absolutely right. Early on, when you see Mark D'Antonio and the Michigan State defense, you're thinking, man, do they really miss Pat Narduzzi, who went to Pitt? You just weren't used to seeing a defense from Michigan State not be able to close teams out and put them away when the offense gave them a lead. These last 4 weeks, that's the way Michigan State's going to win their games. If they win in the playoffs, that's how they're going to win. It's going to come down to the end. It's hard-nosed, hard-fought football, and it's going to be close. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but that defense playing now and creating the turnovers that they're creating, I don't know who beats Michigan State's defense right now the way they're playing.
And it's not as simple as just it doesn't matter. It's not that simple. The matchups matter. I mean, where they play matters. So where Michigan State goes, you can say whatever. It doesn't matter if they're 3 or 4. It does matter in who they play, and then obviously the styles of. You got to beat everybody in the end, but it's going to matter of location and everything else.
We're sitting here bragging about Michigan State, but you also got to look at Oklahoma. And I've called a lot of their football games over the course of these last 3 or 4 weeks, and I would make an argument that Oklahoma has been one of the hottest teams in the entire country. I think they might be the most complete team in college football as we end this season with what Baker Mayfield's doing at quarterback, his ability to make plays running and throwing, Samaje Perine, Joe Mixon in that backfield, Sterling Shepard on the outside, the defense with Mike Stoops and Bob Stoops, the way they played this year. I think coming into the end, as we get ready for this playoff, I would say that Oklahoma is the most complete team getting ready for these next few games.
I hear that argument, and I understand it. And what I see tells me that, too. Their best 3 wins were all against backup quarterbacks. How much does that play into it? Because every year we watch teams and we go, man, they're getting better, they're beating up on everybody, and then they play better competition and sometimes they struggle. I'm not saying they're not deserving. I agree with what you're saying. Baylor with a backup quarterback.
Jarrett Stidham was
with a backup
crushing people. I mean, he was looking not
against
quite,
Kansas State. He looked good.
He looked good, but I mean, they were capable of scoring. You can't take away what Oklahoma.
I'm not taking away from what they did, but you have to look at that as part of the resume as well.
Yeah,
I mean, that's part of it, dude.
The other thing is going to be where they play. If form were to hold from last week and Oklahoma was the 3 seed, I don't think that you can say that playoff games or bowl games are de facto home games, but there is a gargantuan Oklahoma alumni contingent in Dallas. It would be next door, the closest thing you could get to a home game if Oklahoma were to play a semifinal game, and it will be interesting to see if the committee takes that into consideration or if they're able to, assuming that Clemson is still holding on to that number 1 spot and would wind up in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah, if Clemson's at 1 and they're in the Orange Bowl, and if Alabama's at 2 and they end up in the Cotton Bowl, you're right. You think about Oklahoma, if they end up going to the Cotton Bowl, conventional wisdom says that's a home game for them. But if Alabama, think about how many times they played in that stadium.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they have more familiarity with Jerry Jones Stadium than the Cowboys. I mean, they've been there a ton.
Every year.
In fact, they open up next year with SC again there. So I don't know, I guess from a crowd standpoint, but as far as the familiarity, coaches, the routine, where to practice, where we're going, they would feel very comfortable Alabama wouldn't going down there.
We got plenty of storylines, too, with that. I mean, Stoops versus SEC, Saban versus Michigan State in his old school.
Yeah.
I mean, the list.
What about this? If Oklahoma were to wind up at number 4 and they play Clemson, it would be 1 year and 2 days after Clemson absolutely demolished them, 40-6 last year in the Russell Athletic Bowl. You've got that. You've got potential Alabama-Oklahoma, who played a couple of years ago in the Sugar Bowl. A lot of intriguing storylines. Clemson-Alabama at some point, which is unlikely in the semis. Dabo Swinney, of course, playing at Alabama and winning a national championship.
We got good stuff
as
everywhere.
a player.
Everywhere. We got good stuff everywhere.
Great storylines, no matter where you slice it. And the seed chances right there, according our buddies at 538.com, they put mathematical equations to all of this. The highest percentage chance to finish at a certain seed, they expect it is highly likely that the top 2 seeds will be Clemson and Alabama, and Oklahoma with a 66% chance, according to 538.com, to be the 3 seed, and Michigan State a 60% chance to be the 4 seed. As we've said a couple of times, if somebody else works their way into that 4, they're beating the math, and they're also beating the odds and the expectations here. College football playoff reporter throughout the year on ESPN.com and also on the variety of ESPN platforms has been Heather Dinich. Heather joins us right now. She's been watching the committee closely. Heather, what has been the biggest challenge and the schedule for the playoff committee over these last few hours?
Well, they met late last night after all of these games were over, had a quick turnaround. They met at 7:30 Central this morning, and I know they've met for at least 3 hours because as of 10:30, they still weren't done yet, close to being done. I'm sure they're done now, but I think college football fans have to remember they're not sitting there talking about only 4 teams. They're talking about 25, so I'm sure that there was some more debate than people might assume.
Top 4, we believe we know we might have to reorder them from what you've been able to ascertain. Has the top 4 in the order been the bigger challenge, or coming up with the rest of the field, because that certainly impacts the New Year's 6 games as well?
It sure does, because if you look at going into this thing, Ohio State was sitting there at number 6 behind Michigan State. Now, the question is, how far does Iowa fall? Because the Rose Bowl does not have to take the loser of the Big Ten championship game. It is assumed that it will take the next highest ranked team, but that very well could be Ohio State if the Hawkeyes drop below the Buckeyes in this final ranking.
And Heather, we've heard the Rose Bowl people say, use extraordinary circumstances. They try to leave themselves a little bit of latitude to see who they'll pick, but that will come down the line. Obviously, we're looking at the top 4, and Heather will be with us throughout our coverage here on College Football Playoff Selection Day. Heather Dinich reporting from Grapevine, Texas, as we get ready to see the top 4. I'm told that we have the top 4 in hand, so Eric is furiously typing to give us the matchups. We're going to reveal the top 4 and see in which order they are. How high did Michigan State climb? And also Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield, of course, going as Sam told us for that walk-on trophy. How about the 2-time walk-on now leading his team into the playoffs? And Dabo Swinney throwing a huge pizza party in Death Valley. They call it Death Valley, but I mean, that place is live right now with more than 20,000 people as the Tigers are on their way to the playoff. And Jeff Long is getting ready to answer some questions. He could have had to answer a whole lot tougher questions if things had gone differently on Championship Saturday.
A lot less explaining to do.
He'll have some explaining to do about matchups and also about where teams go. Jeff will join us coming up in just a little while. And how about this guy? William Christopher Swinney. They call him Dabo, and he's led his team to a perfect season and headed to the college football playoff. Who Clemson will play, where they will play, almost certainly the Orange Bowl. We'll reveal coming up in a matter of moments. We're going to fill in these brackets. 2 national semifinals on New Year's Eve. Capital One, Orange Bowl, Goodyear, Cotton Bowl, all leading to a title game. Top 4 reveal when you come back.
College Football Playoff Selection Day is presented by AT&T, mobilizing your world. And in part by Chick-fil-A. We didn't invent the chicken, just the chicken sandwich. Welcome back to College Football Playoff Selection Day, presented by AT&T.
That's the ultimate prize, College Football Playoff National Championship Trophy, presented by Dr. Pepper. Ohio State won the initial one, the College Football Playoff, a virtual lock that we will have a new champion. Buckeyes expected to be on the outside looking in, as we believe we know the 4 teams. We just don't know which order, if they'll be slotted in the College Football Playoff, as we're joined by Paul Feinbaum from Charlotte right now. Paul, we're just moments away from the reveal of the top 4 and the teams and who they'll be playing in the playoff. What do you expect to see?
I expect them to go with Clemson first, Alabama second, Michigan State third, and Oklahoma fourth. I think Michigan State is the tricky one, but quite frankly, Reese, being an SEC country, this is hard to say, but the Big Ten has been the best conference in college football this year, and I think Michigan State will get the reward of that by winning the Big Ten championship. I think they'll bypass Oklahoma. Oklahoma has been a great team. I've heard what you've all said. They are complete, but I don't think they'll get much out of not playing yesterday.
And it's been part of the debate about a Big 12 championship game, or at least being idle on the final weekend of the season. We'll hear from Paul Feinbaum later in the show. Jesse Palmer also joining us now from New York City. So, Jesse, as you look at this and await the revealing of the top 4, what are you expecting to see?
I'm expecting to see, like everybody else, Clemson at number 1, Alabama at number 2. I think Oklahoma is going to be number 3, guys. To me, since they lost against Texas in the last 7 games, they've been as good as anybody else out there in the country. They're passing the eye test. Since that time, it's been the best offense in college football. Has there been a bigger impact transfer/walk-on quarterback to his new program than Baker Mayfield's been to Oklahoma since Cam Newton in 2010? He's been that good. The defense has been phenomenal. And I think it's actually good news for Michigan State if they finish 4th, because I think if they had to play Alabama in the first semifinal, that's a worse matchup for Michigan State because of the style they play on offense than it would be for Oklahoma. So I'm expecting Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, Michigan State.
You know, Jesse, you echo something that Kirk had said earlier, that the matchups are important. While all of these teams are splitting hairs to find differences among them, save Clemson sitting at the undefeated spot. But I've heard some talk about trying to avoid the Alabama-Oklahoma matchup in the semifinals. The committee should not do that. If they are trying to do that, then what they're saying is those are the top 2 teams, and they should be ranked 1 and 2. Well, agreed or not?
Yeah, I think they have to avoid that, because you're going to have, no matter what their rankings are they're going to have conspiracy theorists out there. They're going to say, well, they purposely did this or that. We all know the individuals on this committee, and I think they take a great deal of pride in doing what's right. And I do think that they're just looking at, here's the best team, 1. Here's the second best team, 2. Here's the next best team, 3. And here's our 4th team, 4. I don't think they're trying to create matchups in any way. I think they just stack the teams up and let the chips fall where they may.
That's what they should do.
They should do that. And the hard part is, guys, some people use eyeball tests more than others.
Yeah.
Some people use stats more than others. There's 12 people in this committee room. There's 12 different people who place importance on different measures. So it isn't the same, and it isn't just one thing that's going to rule the day. So it is hard to get a grasp, Joey, on what they do and what they're going to use because there's so many people.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think this one is a little easier because we know who the 4 teams are in this ranking. You know, like last year, it was a little bit more difficult. We didn't know what was coming out in the last week, so it was like, okay, what are they thinking? Where are they going here? This one's a little easier. To avoid the matchups, it would be crazy to me. I don't know that you could sit in a room and look at these teams and specifically say, any one of these teams couldn't beat anyone else. I don't think that the matchups matter. I think it's going to be 2 great games with 4 great teams.
Would there be a scenario in the top 4? You tell me this almost every Tuesday night before we go on. Reese, if this happens, I'm going off. Is there anything that would upset you from the top 4? Any order?
Not this year. No, not at all. Not this year. Nothing could upset
1 through 4?
You know what? And last year we went 3 went to 6, and you're right. I got upset. I can't see any one of these 4 moving out. So as long as these 4 teams are in the playoffs, these are the 4 best teams they deserve to be in, I'm fine.
You're talking big picture matchups don't matter. I think from the game and determining who could win, the matchups matter a whole lot. I mean,
yeah, they do. They do.
Teams match up better against other teams. It's just ball.
And one last thing about how they end up stacking these teams up. I think we're all sometimes guilty of looking at yesterday or the last couple weeks. I think the committee is looking at the entire season. So what you did early in the year is part of your resume, and it should be, because they're sitting there for this last Sunday and they're evaluating all these teams. Sure, the eye test comes into play, all the different numbers come into play, but it is subjective. But they are not just looking at yesterday. They're looking at everything that you've done this year, and that could either help you or hurt you depending on the case.
Eric, the graphic master is ready.
Uh-oh.
It's time to show you the top 4 teams, the 4 teams that will compete for the College Football Playoff National Championship. And we start with the number 1 team. Roll it up there for us.
Pizza party.
Pizza party just got
How do you like it?
tastier. The only undefeated team, the Clemson Tigers, potentially, depending on how the rankings come out, they could have 3 top 10 wins. At worst, I'd say 3 top 12 wins on their.
What do you say, meat lovers today for the
meat lovers if it tastes good, right?
Oh, they're going crazy.
Don't want any broccoli there. You think they like it in Death Valley?
Oh, that's awesome.
They have waited for this, and certainly with Dabo Swinney as head coach, Clemson's had terrific success. But they haven't won a national championship since Danny Ford was leading the way, Homer Jordan. 1981. It's been a while. They've got a chance.
Something to remember about Dabo Swinney and Clemson. Last 5 years, they've averaged a 10-2 season. That's 5th best in all of college football. This is not just this year. He's been building this for a while.
No question. Alabama, Oregon, Clemson coming into this year are the only ones that continue to put together 10-win seasons year after year. So the Tigers, their closest bowl game in the national semifinal on New Year's Eve, the Capital One Orange Bowl. So they'll be headed down to South Florida. Traditional ACC matchup, too.
Call your travel agent. They can now officially get your hotel, get your flights. You're heading to Miami.
They got to put the pizza down and start making.
You better get on that phone right now.
So Clemson is number 1. Now number 2. Is there a little drama there?
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
It is Alabama.
Somebody call Nick and let him know there, too.
There's a drama coming at 3 and 4. These 2 were expected. Now it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, so Alabama back-to-back SEC champions. They'll be going back to Dallas Goodyear Cotton Bowl, as Kirk alluded to earlier, familiar with the venue. They opened the season there against Wisconsin, and now will play on New Year's Eve on ESPN in one national semifinal there. So the Crimson Tide, when they get to Dallas, no big watch party for them, as Kaylee told us. Business as usual. Tide, the only team to go back-to-back and make the playoff. Who's number 3? Who will Alabama face?
Ooh!
Michigan State makes the jump. Nick Saban against the school he used to coach. Mark D'Antonio is on his staff.
Yep.
And this is a much different Michigan State program than the last time they met in the postseason was after the 2010 season when Alabama blitzed them 49-7.
Mark D'Antonio, there's a reaction there in East Lansing. Mark D'Antonio took a lot away from Jim Tressel, but a lot also away from Nick Saban in a time that he was with him. That'll be a great matchup, a physical matchup.
And how about for the second straight year, we also get the SEC and the Big Ten International semifinal. Last year, Ohio State took down the Tide on its way to the championship. So that means Clemson on New Year's Eve will start its path toward a championship against Boomer's coming here, right? Oklahoma. So no surprises in the top four. We expected this. Sooners 1 year and 2 days after getting annihilated by Clemson in the postseason. And by the way, Clemson without Deshaun Watson in the postseason last year. 40-6. Chance for a little redemption for the Sooners against.
I really think that loss had a lot to do with the changes. Lincoln Riley coming in. All the things that they did in the offseason were a result from their last time they played against Clemson.
If I'm Michigan State, and I said this last year, when the Big Ten goes against the SEC in this style of game, because it's a physical running style of game, if I'm Michigan State, I would like to see Alabama because that's the style of offense they've been facing all year long. Power football between the tackles.
Yeah, well, you're playing power football, but you're not playing with exactly the same players. It's going to be when we've seen Alabama struggle, typically, if I'm looking at this board and I'm an Alabama fan, I don't want to play Deshaun Watson a mobile threat or Baker Mayfield a mobile threat. Connor Cook, I think it's a better matchup. It's a more favorable matchup. They're trying to do the same thing, but Alabama's a more talented team, a more skilled team. In the trenches, the depth that they have, they can play man coverage. It's just that's a good matchup for Alabama. If I was picking any team, that's who I'd want if I was them.
And when we're talking style, though, and if I'm a defensive coach and I have to go against these quarterbacks, you said Deshaun Watson, you talked about Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma. Yeah. If I'm Michigan State and you talk style and what I'm used to coaching against, what I'm used to seeing every single weekend, I want Alabama because that's the style that I'm used to being able and gearing my team to get ready to stop.
Well, what you're saying is Michigan State prides itself on stopping the run.
Absolutely.
That's their entire defensive package. It has been since Dino's been there, and Alabama has to run the ball.
Yep.
So it's going to be a lot like what Michigan State faced yesterday against Iowa. Yeah. Same type of philosophy.
Ohio State, same thing.
I agree with what you're saying. I think there's motivation for both teams. Alabama lost to a Big Ten team last year. And Michigan State, all they hear about is the SEC. So there's going to be a lot of motivation, I think, for both of those teams. And I think the Oklahoma-Clemson game has a chance to be very intriguing, too, because of the quarterback play, the way they'll spread you out, the chance to be able to put points up on the board. It's going to be a shootout. Very different, kind of a contrast in styles in these two semifinal games.
Who does a better job in big games and playing the chip on your shoulder than D'Antonio?
Oh.
Urban
Meyer did last year.
Last 7 matchups versus top 5 opponents, he's 6-1. And what are we going to hear for the next 20-something days? Michigan State has absolutely no shot. It works perfect for Michigan State. D'Antonio, how they function the best over the next 26 days it'll be perfect for them. All
right, Goodyear Mort-driven debate now about the top 4 that we have. Joey, I want to start with you here. Let's take a step back and go big picture. And we touched on this before we revealed the top 4. There will be conspiracy theorists out there who say that the committee moved Oklahoma behind Michigan State to avoid Alabama-Oklahoma in the national semifinals. Do you agree, or is this a completely justified move based on what Michigan State accomplished?
I think it's a justified move, and I talked about it early on before we even seen the rankings. If you look at Michigan State's resume, and we've always said, and you've preached this to me, that these committee members go in the room and start fresh every single week. Now that Michigan State is the Big Ten champ, now that you look at their resume with the teams on it, Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa at the end at number 4, Michigan State, I wouldn't even been surprised to see Michigan State even have the ability to go to number 2. Having them come in at number 3 and jumping Oklahoma is not a surprise to me. They've earned it, and their resume says they deserve it.
You know how evenly matched these teams are. If you look at the FPI, which is a forward-looking measure, a predictive measure, you know who the number 1 team in the country is in FPI? It's the team that's number 4 in the playoff. Oklahoma sits on top of the FPI. So no conspiracy theories here. We've got 2 great semifinal matchups. You talked about the way Oklahoma changed its mindset, largely based on what happened to Clemson last year against Clemson when they played in the Russell Athletic Bowl. How does Stoops use that? Everything's different for them now. Things are different for Clemson now, too. How do you use that?
In college football, with long layoffs, motivation becomes kind of the secret ingredient. Whichever coach can find a way, however long, how many days do we have between 20 to 30 days, however long this is until we get these games, the chance to watch them play. Whoever has a team that shows up early to look at film, that doesn't complain about practice, that is focused, that is locked in, that's the team that has the edge. So you got to look at these teams. Is Clemson going to have to try to create nobody respects us type of thing? For Oklahoma, it's very clear. This team embarrassed you a year ago. A lot of you were on the field last year against this team. This is your chance to get that redemption. So, yeah, I always look for intangibles when it used to come to the BCS championship games, and now that it comes to the playoff, I think for Oklahoma, it won't take a lot for Bob Stoops to get his boys ready to play.
David, you and I have talked a lot over the last few weeks about the potential for Clemson's defense wearing down. You played defensive line. There's a lot of effort that goes into playing that position. You don't have time to recover during the season.
No.
Clemson doesn't have the depth that it had last year on that defensive front, but they've got a lot of talent. How does the layoff help them in terms of recovery?
Well, now you get to get your legs back. I mean, this is a huge opportunity for you to sit back, get off the couch. It's not the week-to-week grind. You're not going 5-6 days a week. So it's obviously a huge thing. And when it goes to motivation, like Kirk was talking about, too, I don't think it matters on the field. Mm-hmm. It's not one of those things where they roll the ball out there and all of a sudden you have more motivation and you're going to beat somebody. But the preparation, when you're told you can't do something as a player, you know what I'm doing? If I'm worried, I'm watching tape more. Yeah. I'm spending more time in the film room to make sure I get more keys. And everything the coach says to me, I'm listening to and I'm digesting because I know it might come down to one play, as opposed to when I'm the favorite, hey, you're going to win, you're going to take care of business. I'm less inclined to do those extra things that mean, sometimes the difference in a game.
On the subject of the favorites, that has been established very quickly. The Bear, Chris Felica, passing along to me.
Where's the Bear cam?
In one national semifinal, probably what you would expect in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl, Alabama is a 9-point favorite over Michigan State. But the other one, the 4-seed Oklahoma, is a 2.5-point favorite over Clemson to open.
There's that FPI.
Orange Bowl.
FPI.
There you go. Huh? It's forward-looking, and it does reflect. It doesn't reflect because it's a different thing, but it mirrors in some ways. What the Vegas rankings would be.
Yeah, and you know what? And when you look at the Big Ten SEC matchup, I believe Alabama was like an 8-point favorite last year against Ohio State. Yeah. And when I'm looking matchups, and I'm thinking as a coach, I'm thinking as players, and I look at the teams I want to play, it's not just about the talent on the other side. When you talk about preparation, you talk about having to watch film. If I'm watching film of a team that is like the teams that I've played, we don't have to create new defenses. Mm-hmm. We don't have to create new offenses. We just have to get good and get better at what we've already set up ourselves to do. It's when you face a team that is not similar to what you've been facing all year long, is now when you got to go back to the drawing board and say, we're going to come with something different. We're going to come with a whole new style to try to stop one of these offenses. In these cases, these matchups, all four of these teams have seen this same similar style that they'll be facing.
Michigan State ain't scared. I can promise you that. They were a 2-touchdown dog to Ohio State. This is what they've done with big games. They're not going to.
They're more in a comfort zone.
Absolutely. Yeah, Antonio loves this. Oh, yeah. He hopes the spread gets bigger.
They're going to play clips of everybody talking about them all week, about being the worst team in the Final Four, no shot against Alabama. They're going to do that for the next 3 weeks.
All right, plenty of time to talk about this. We want to bring in right now the chairman of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, Jeff Long, who joins us now. And, Jeff, certainly there is not the same type of controversy as when we were at this point a year ago. But the decision I do want to ask you about, what it was like in the room. What was it that carried the day for Michigan State to move them ahead of Oklahoma and to get that 3 spot?
Well, that's probably where we spent the most of the time, Reese, as you would expect. And great discussion, great debate. Both conference champions, both 4 wins over top 25 teams. But what it came down to is really Michigan State with 2 top 10 wins and then adding a win over last week's number 4 ranked team. So I think when you looked at the body of work, the complete resume, that's what pushed Michigan State just slightly ahead of Oklahoma. And again, Oklahoma, Big 12 conference champ, was an outstanding season, great body of work, but just that little bit of difference pushed Michigan State ahead.
Okay, now last week you alluded to the fact that there was a lot of conversation about Alabama perhaps passing Clemson. How would you characterize that debate in the room?
Not this week. Clearly, Clemson #1, 3 top 10 victories on their resume now, undefeated, ACC champs. Really very little discussion. Certainly we went over it, but clearly Clemson #1 team in the nation.
Okay, you've mentioned resume twice to both of my questions. Was there any sentiment in the room, because we just talked about the FPI, we talked about Oklahoma maybe being the hottest team. Was there anybody who stood up in the room and said, you know what? Oklahoma's the best team?
Oh, there were people in the room that felt like after all of this that Oklahoma could be the #1 team. No question. As you mentioned, they're balanced offense and defense. They've got an explosive offense. And again, it's hard to express, but all 4 of these teams very close. But little differences in that resume, in the number of wins, how they won those games that made the difference. But certainly, I can tell you there were people in that room that believed Oklahoma could be the #1 team.
I couldn't coax it out of you on College Game Day Saturday, but now, was there ever a question that the Big Ten championship game was a de facto quarterfinal play-in game?
We don't look at it that way, but certainly it played out that way with Michigan State's win.
Jeff,
give it up.
Were the 4 teams as clear-cut as we thought? Was there any debate about Ohio State, about Stanford getting into the mix?
Certainly, we discussed those teams, but I don't think I could characterize it that Stanford and Ohio State were close to getting into the top 4, no.
Okay, what was the biggest challenge presented in trying to line up these teams as it pertains to seeding?
You know, I do think that we don't look at seeding, really. We don't. I know that there's people out there that, as you guys were talking about conspiracies, there's certainly none in that room. Our charge is rank that #1 team through 4, best 4 teams, and that's what we did. What happens after the placement in the semifinals, you know, that takes care of itself. But we really do focus, and I made it clear as we started that portion of the meeting, we're to rank those 4 best teams, and I believe the committee has done that.
Okay, we're not going to reveal the rest of your rankings until a little bit later on in the afternoon. It seems that the 4 teams, maybe not the order, but the selection of the 4 teams was the easy part. What about ranking the teams below them? How would you characterize that, namely Stanford, Ohio State, and Iowa after that near miss in the Big Ten championship game last night?
You're right, Reese. We're going to reveal that a little bit later. But, you know, those were difficult discussions, no question. There's a lot of variables in there, and we spent a lot of time on that, say, 5 through 8, 5 through 10, and then a couple other places throughout the top 25. So when we unveil that, you'll see why we had some very difficult discussions. You know, head-to-heads were some particularly issues in that remainder of the top 25.
Hey, Jeff, how would you characterize, just kind of putting a bow on this in a big picture, how would you characterize the difficulty of the decisions made this year in the second year of the playoff with what you had to do where selection was more controversial a year ago?
Yeah, 2 very different years, Reese. I would say in some ways last year was more difficult. This year was less so, but there's always nuances in each one of these as you look at the top 4 and then through the top 25. It's always going to be challenging because there's so many teams that are so close and so little difference between those resumes that each year is going to be challenging. But if you ask me to say which one was a little more challenging, I'd say last year.
All right, that is Jeff Long, the chairman of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Jeff is going to be back during the 3 o'clock hour after we reveal the rest of the rankings. That's 3 o'clock Eastern time, 5 through 25. And that is also the time when we'll also tell you the starting times, the kickoff times for both of the national semifinals, Clemson-Oklahoma game and Alabama-Michigan State. Now, it was easy to jump on Jeff a year ago. What's your reaction to what you heard from him, for the rationale, the thought process of the committee this time?
I think our forecasting is what they were dealing with in that room. You know, we knew the 4, they knew the 4 after the results from last night. I think it just came down to them really getting together and being able to look at everybody's resume and the eye test and figure out, what do we do? We know Clemson's 1. We know Bama's 2. What are we going to do about 3 and 4? And I bet you, you know, late into last night, early this morning. They went back and forth and debated that, as he just said. And at the end of the day, they just felt Michigan State from top to bottom, everything that they accomplished, the final exclamation point beating Iowa in the fashion that they did, they deserve to move up at 3. You can make an argument for Oklahoma. You could say Oklahoma deserved to be there at 3 because I feel that Oklahoma's been as good as anybody these last 6 or 7 games. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and beat my desk and say, Oklahoma, I mean, I get it. I could see Michigan State making that switch to 3.
I think sometimes you look at what Jeff says, and sometimes you might get a little bit frustrated because you say Clemson's clearly number 1, and sometimes there's discrepancies. But he's also speaking for 12 people. He can't sit up there and tell you everyone's opinion. So it's clear that 1 through 4 in that room wasn't settled. And there is a lot of ways you can go, and there is no right answer. The bottom line is we got the 4 best teams. We got the 4 teams that needed to be in it. And you know what? You're going to have to beat the team in front of you to get to the championship game. So I don't think you can split hairs about where anybody is. Go out, win, and you go to the championship game, and then you control your destiny.
And that's the most relaxed we've seen Jeff all year long.
He's like,
like, my goodness, it's over. I'm out of the room.
Is that Ohio State, Baylor, TCU?
Reese, what do you got for me? Just throw them at me. I'm looking forward to seeing the next 5 teams. And you mentioned it with Iowa, Stanford, Ohio State. Where do those teams fall? There's some great games beyond the 2 that we're talking. So the amount of time, it'd be interesting, how much time was spent outside of this top 4? I mean, that was, I'd imagine that was fairly easy, to put those top 4 together. And then the tough part becomes, what do you do after the top 4?
Especially the Rose Bowl. And, you have Iowa that played their hearts out. They're undefeated, lose in the fashion in which they did. You have Ohio State when they played against Michigan. You wonder which way they'll go.
We did the mock committee thing last year. Dude, it's hard to pay attention after the 4, you're like, woo, thank God I got that done. Now you're like, oh, wait, I got to do 5, 6. And then when you get down to 25, you're like, yeah, okay.
So you were alluding to the fact that that during the ACC championship game last night that Jeff and the committee members went, oh, thank goodness for ACC officials.
All sides.
Wow.
Just kidding.
They're like, where's the pizza at? Bring on the pizza party.
I'm kidding. Just
a little.
There's a little barbecue every now and then.
A minute 8, midfield, 3 timeouts. A lot of people have been holding their breath there.
No guarantees. No guarantees. Time now for Planning for Success, brought to you by Northwestern Mutual. And joining us now, a team making the playoffs for the 2nd straight year. Nick Saban joins us now, head coach at Alabama. Crimson Tide will play in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl to take on Michigan State. Nick, you said something yesterday after your team beat Florida that I thought was intriguing. You said that you weren't even sure after the Ole Miss game whether your team would be here. When were you sure that this was a likelihood or at least a possibility?
Well, I really always believed in this team, but it was all about how we were going to respond to that defeat, because there was a lot of expectations for this team, and that was a tough game for us, and we didn't play very well. We turned the ball over a lot, and it left a lot of questions in your mind, and the big question is how you're going to respond to a defeat. It's a real test of your character as a man as well as a competitor, and when things don't go well, how do you respond? And they did it the right way, and because of that, that's why I really wanted this team to have success and win an SEC championship.
You had the opportunity to go to the playoff for the 2nd straight year. What did you take from that experience a year ago that you'll use as you get ready for this year's playoff?
Well, the first thing we take away from it is we didn't have very much success. So we got beat. But I think the whole idea of a bowl game and a playoff game being together was sort of a new recipe that maybe we learned a little bit about, and maybe we'll do a little bit better job this time around, at least in preparation. I know we're going to play an outstanding team, but they're all outstanding teams in the playoffs. So no matter how much you talk about the matchups, everybody in this Final Four can beat anybody else, and you're just going to have to play your best to have the best chance to have success.
In terms of this matchup, how much have you seen of Michigan State? Obviously, I know you're familiar with Mark D'Antonio and his style of play. How much have you seen of Michigan State this season?
Really haven't seen a lot, just a couple times on TV. I saw that last drive, 22 plays last night. That was enough for me to see in terms of the competitive spirit that team had to come through when it was needed most. And they did a great job and won the game and won the Big Ten championship for themselves. And, I congratulate them for that and congratulate Mark, who's done a great job there. And we know what kind of physical, tough teams they have at Michigan State, and it'll be a real challenge for our team.
And certainly you're very familiar with Michigan State from your time there. You mentioned how tough-minded the Spartans are. How would you describe the competitive character of your team?
Well, this team has responded well with their backs against the wall all year long since the Ole Miss game, and I was really pleased with the competitive character that we took into the game last night in the SEC championship game. We didn't play pretty all the time, and you know, left some points on the board, not scoring in the red area, turning the ball over, missing the field goal. But at the same time, this team has shown tremendous resiliency to play the next play, do what they need to do next so that they have the best chance to be successful. And I've been really pleased with that mental toughness that this team is showing.
Ever given a guy the ball 90 times in 2 games before the last 2?
No, never have.
That was quick.
But the thing that's hard about Derek, it's hard for me about Derek. You know, I told him, I said, Derek, you're out. We're going to play Kenyon and the other guys now. And then Florida went down and scored in 3 plays, and I said, not so fast. And he was happy that he was going to be able to go back in. And I was happy to see him go back in. And then he made me happy by the way he ran. So everybody was happy with him. So how do you not play the guy? I was happy watching him run it 14 times in a row at Auburn. He was happy doing it. So I don't know what to say. I don't know how to answer that. But he gets better as he goes. So he does make me happy.
Kirk? Coach, I'd love to ask you one question. We have all these other teams, and they've got these huge parties. Everybody's eating pizza and eating different food, and they're all together. And then we go to Tuscaloosa, and it's like, you know, it's Sunday. You know, we're getting ready for recruiting, getting ready for – when you deal with those expectations that are almost like it's a – you know, not so much internally, but on the outside, it's a given Alabama's going to be one of the 4. How do you block that out, not just during the season, but for the 12 months, and deal with that and get your team to realize, hey, this is a special thing to win in Atlanta. Let's celebrate that. This is a special thing to get into the playoff. How do you deal with that when everybody else is celebrating? You guys are just kind of like, all right, that's part of the process, business as usual.
Well, what I tell our players, we're going to have a meeting today at 2 o'clock, is, guys, you really should be happy and you should be excited about what you've been able to accomplish and winning the SEC championship. But now I have a question for you. What do you want to do now? It's as simple as that. I mean, because getting in is one thing, which maybe we were a little too happy with a year ago, but actually doing the things you need to do, the hard work that you need to do to play well in a bowl game, because you can't carry the momentum from the season to December 31st. So you're going to have a stop down here for 8, 9, 10 days, and then you're going to start practicing again, and you got to try to rekindle that sort of momentum that you had ending the season and get your team playing well again. So they got to be focused on that, and they got to understand how much hard work it really takes. Last year, I thought our team thought, well, we got in the playoffs. This is a big reward for getting in the playoffs. How come we're working so hard? Well, if you want to play well against a good team like Ohio State, you better work hard and you better prepare well, because it's going to be really difficult to have success against them.
Nick, congratulations on SEC championship, making it back to the college football playoff. Look forward to seeing you in Dallas.
All right, guys. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, Nick Saban, happy. Keep giving the ball to Derrick Henry. He'll be happy. People
Big
eating
fella.
pizza in Clemson. We better believe they're happy. How about Clemson in the rain, beating Notre Dame on October 3rd, staking claim that they're one of the best teams in the country? Deshaun Watson just continues to get better and better and control the team. He is a Heisman Trophy contender. They debuted at #1 in the college football playoff rankings, and they were able to go wall to wall as #1 after winning the ACC title, clinching the first 13-win season in school history. And now joining us from Death Valley, the site of, perhaps, we're researching it, the world's largest outdoor pizza party there as Clemson celebrates its spot in the college football playoff. Head coach of the Tigers, Dabo Swinney. Dabo, as you look at this and what this team has accomplished, what does it mean for you now that you've had a night to sleep on it, #1, undefeated, and in the playoff, it's a top seed?
a few hours to sleep on it. Well, it's special. You know, just so proud of this team. You know, this was a team that a lot of people said we were kind of a year away. 9 new starters in our offensive line, our entire defensive line, new starters, entire offensive line. So a lot of people kind of looked at this team and I think undervalued them a little bit as far as, looking to next year. But these guys were dialed in on 2015. And, we set out August 3rd to try to win them all. And we stayed focused and we stayed the course and we stayed committed to, just our mentality and our preparation each and every week. Our leadership was phenomenal. We weren't always pretty, but championship teams find ways to win different ways. And that's what this team has done time and time again. So just, fun season. It's great to be able to, at this point, go pole to pole as the #1 team. And but now it's a new season. We'll give our guys a little time off, and then we'll get ready for the new season, and that's the postseason and the Final Four.
Dabo, what are the challenges? Because over the next few weeks, the game that you had against Oklahoma last year is going to be brought up often, and you guys blitzed them and embarrassed them. A proud program like that. You alluded to the fact of how different your team is. Their team's clearly different with Baker Mayfield, but that's still going to be one of the subplots. What are the challenges of dealing with that mentally with your team?
There's no challenges. Oklahoma is a phenomenal team. All you got to do is watch the tape, and we'll watch a lot of tape between now and December 31st. So they're a special team. Our guys have a tremendous amount of respect. It's never as good as it seems. It's never as bad as it seems. And I've been on both sides of that coin. I've gotten my tail whipped, and all of a sudden you turn the ball over a few times and things can get away. And that's what happened in that game. We're not that much better than Oklahoma. But that day we were, and that's simply because, they had a ton of turnovers. And we had a pick six, and we had a lot of momentum, and we played very well. And, that's just what happens when you lose the margin by that much. So our guys, know that we'll get a much different opponent this year. We'll get an Oklahoma team that is deserving to be in this Final Four. And, again, one of the best coaching staffs in the country. They've had an outstanding year. We know we'll have to play very, very well. There'll be a very small margin for error for both teams. So it should be a great matchup. But last year's game, people will talk about that, but it really has nothing to do with this year's game. One of the things I tell our players all the time is, last week's touchdowns, last week's tackles and sacks, last year's success doesn't win for you this year or this game. So, we'll reload and reset and have a good bowl prep and go down there and try to play our best 4 quarters of the season, because that's what it's going to take.
Dabo, David Pollack and I touched on this a minute ago. In your judgment, what's the significance of having a little bit of time for your guys to rest and rejuvenate, particularly your guys in your defensive front seven?
It's critical. We've played 10 straight now, and 10 straight and 5 of our last 7 on the road. So now you got travel logistics and, kind of different schedule and all that type of stuff. So it's great that, our guys will have some time off. They need that to refuel and recharge. And then we have a formula that we believe in as far as how we get our team ready for a bowl game. We've had a lot of success winning bowl games and stuff. So we'll go back to work and do what we do in preparing the team. But it's great for these guys to get a little bit of time, but you start all over when you get into bowl time. We want to prepare well to win the game, but it's also a great opportunity to develop your football team for spring practice. Some of these young guys and really get a chance to coach them. So we'll have a good balance of working on Clemson, working on Oklahoma, but also getting back to a lot of the fundamentals and techniques, because when you take a lot of time off and we don't play again until December 31st, you got to go back and reteach a lot of things.
Dabo, we've talked a good bit over the course of the season about the accomplishments that Clemson has had under you many times, maybe not properly appreciated. What program statement does it make for Clemson to be #1 seed and in the college football playoff?
Well, I think, the biggest thing that we set out to do 7 years ago when I got this job was to become a consistent program. That was the #1 goal. And, we came out of the gate the first year and played for our championship. And, then we win 10 games for the first time in 20 years. And, my message to the team back in 11 was, listen, let's just keep our head down. Let's learn and grow from our success, learn and grow from our failures. We got to become nobody's going to really, give us respect until we earn it. And, to do that, we've just got to go put, 4, 5, 10-plus win seasons together. Let's be a consistent top 15, top 10 program, because if we can do that and then win some big games out of conference, then eventually we're going to blossom on the outside. So our focus has been on the inside. I think you have to be a champion on the inside before you can be a champion on the outside, and that's what we talk about in our program, building champion men and doing things, the right way, being purposeful in everything that we do, doing the common things in an uncommon way. That's what we talk about. And so, this is just it's been a great journey these 7 years, but where we are right now is simply a reflection of a lot of hard work by a lot of great people. My first senior group when I was an interim coach in 2008, I'm not sitting here without that group buying in. And that group in 2009, when we said, okay, here's our team goals, here's what our vision for our program is, and just the buy-in from all of those guys. And they didn't get a chance to be on a 13-0 team, but they're all a part of this. And so I'm so thankful for that and appreciative of the journey that we've been on. There's not many teams out there that have had 5, 10-plus win seasons, maybe a couple. But as I said earlier today to this crowd, the best is yet to come for Clemson. I mean, we've had a great season, but we're just getting going. And, we've also had 6 out of our 7 years top 10 academically. So we're not just doing things on the field. We're doing things off the field. And I've had 120 seniors and 114 graduates, and that's the best thing that we've accomplished in our program. So just proud of all the people that have been a part of our success. This was a great day, a great celebration for our fans. 34 years since Clemson's been number 1. And, we're going to do everything we can to stay there.
Dabo, congratulations. I look forward to seeing you against Oklahoma coming up in a little while. That's Dabo Swinney, the head coach of the Tigers.
Him and Nick very similar, aren't they? Very similar. Sound the same.
Both have some Alabama in their background.
A lot of different ways to win, for sure. Dabo talked a little bit about this being the program statement now, and now they get the other opportunity. Joey, what's your reaction to now Clemson handling maybe not the Vegas favorite, but being the hunted team as the number 1 seed?
You know what? It'll be interesting to me to see, and when we could see both coaches when they talk. Dabo has more of a outgoing personality, and you wonder, with Alabama being in last year and not winning, the anger that they have from coming up short to the other 3 teams who this is their first time in, would be a different feeling. When you listen to Saban talk, it's like you're listening to a Jedi Knight. You know what I mean? He's like Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's talking to you, but you feel like he's breaking you down. You're sitting there, you're buying into the mental aspect of what he's selling. I am interested to see the anger that Alabama is going to bring to this playoff because they fell short last season, getting back in and another shot at it, saying, okay, this is our chance to redo and play Alabama football. Let's see what happens moving forward.
Very impressed with Dabo Swinney and what he's been able to accomplish. Obviously, we've talked about the 10-win seasons. He talked about it a lot. Beating the programs that he's beaten in Oklahoma, LSU, Georgia over the last 5 years. But think about coming into this season, too. Basically, retooling their whole defense. I mean, building it new. Chad Morris leaves, your offensive coordinator, one of the best offensive coordinators in college football. He gone.
5 new offensive linemen.
He leaves. All new offensive linemen. You lose your best playmaker in Mike Williams early in the season.
Deion Kane steps up.
I mean, so they've handled adversity. They've done such a great job. Whatever came their way, they continued to win. I mean, just props and kudos. I mean, they've just done such a great job handling the whole situations. And because of number 4, the giant eraser, the best player in the country, I think, Deshaun Watson, they're sitting right there at number 1.
Yeah, and you go back, we said earlier, last 5 years, you're up there with some pretty elite company. When you're talking about this Clemson program and what Dabo Swinney said his goal was try to get up to a team where we're doing it for 4 or 5 years. Well, they're 10-2 on an average for the last 5 years. So mission accomplished in that question about this program. The other thing is, what David is saying is true. This is a defense last year was the best in the country. They come back, they have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I've had this team a bunch this year. They got tired. They played 10 or 11 straight weeks. It's not just the physical fatigue. It's the mental fatigue. And I think getting that 2 or 3 weeks to be able to recoup, get their legs under them, rest up, get their minds ready. Brent Venables, who, by the way, was with Bob Stoops and Oklahoma for a long time. Went up against them last year in the bowl game. Their defense will be a big key in trying to contain Baker Mayfield and deal with the physicality of Mixon and Pirine.
Is there any concern when you look at Clemson getting in, they're having a pizza party, as if we've accomplished something here, and they have. And you look at Alabama, who is saying,
they're in the
yeah,
meeting.
we'll be here at we'll be here at 2 o'clock.
Position meetings?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What time are we getting back to work and get to? Do you wonder? Is there a different mentality coming in with the team that's been there versus a team just?
I appreciate Dabo doing it differently.
Well, I think
appreciate
that's the key, David. There are a lot of different ways to win, and the number one thing, in my judgment, a head coach can do, be yourself. Do it your way. Don't try to copy some other guy. Yeah. And Dabo does it his way. Bob Stoops has done it his way for a long time. This team coming off an embarrassment in the bowl game last year to Clemson. Baker Mayfield came from Texas Tech, sat out a year, won the starting quarterback job, and then you thought, same old OU, going to spit the bit when you least expect it when they lost to Texas. But this was like real old school OU. They rebounded and they started torching people, won 7 straight games to end the regular season, won the Big 12 outright for the first time since 2010, and now they're going to the playoff where they will take on number 1 Clemson. That guy with Samantha Ponder will be important. Sterling Shepard's there. Sam?
Thanks, Reese. First, we got to give a shout out for Sterling here, who stood here for 15 minutes listening to you all talk. So thanks for that. Sterling, I know the team cheered when you found out the number 4 ranking, but what was your personal response?
I was just excited. I mean, after a week off, we were excited to get back to football, and now we can get in the film room. We know where we're playing, so guys are excited about it. So
let's talk about who you're playing. Obviously, you're familiar with this Clemson program, but a different team this year. So how do you think you match up?
I think we match up well. It's just it's a different year, new team. They have a great defense, and offensively, we just have to get back in the film room and try to get back to what we do best.
The guys talked about earlier on the show, that whole retribution factor. Do you feel that at all? Is that a real thing when you play this team again after last year?
No, like I said, I mean, it's a new team, it's a new year. So last year was last year, and we have to put that behind us. And we know we're playing a good team. So like I said, we'll get back in the film room and get these things ironed out.
2 familiar faces missing today, of course. Your head coach, Bob Stoops. They all acted well, Coach. And also your quarterback, Baker Mayfield, was not here. Did you give him a hard time? Why wasn't your quarterback here?
No, I mean, we got a chance to FaceTime him, and we know he's handling business. He got a walk-on award, so we're excited for him. And Coach Stoops is also at an award ceremony, so we're happy for him. We got through talking to him on the phone, though.
So what'd Coach tell you after you found out the ranking?
I think you know. I mean,
He's not supposed to tell me anything. Very Bob Stoops-esque. I appreciate that. We do have to tell David Pollack. Pollack, when you were talking about OU trying to take away their shine, saying that they, played these backup quarterbacks, not a lot of love for you in this room, David.
No.
Man, I'm crushed. I don't know if I can make it through the rest of the show, Sam, without. I mean, it's just. I'm going to try to push on, guys.
No, it's devastating for you.
Hey, Sam, tell 3 we love him. Tell him he's a baller.
There you go. There's the other side of it.
There you go. We love him.
They do love
That's good.
you
He's the positive. Yin and yang, baby.
Sterling wouldn't do it. I'll tell Sam what was said, or tell America. You hear what David Pollack doesn't think we win ball game.
And of course, that's how the world works. I gave him credit. I'm just saying they did play their best 3 wins. We're against 3 backup quarterbacks.
Trying to take away from what that defense has accomplished this year.
That's nice. The facts.
That just wasn't nice.
I hate to let the facts get in the way of a good argument. My bad, guys.
Much more to come. College football playoff selection day. There's one thing I know about you. You're not afraid to keep it 100. You'll do it every time.
Even though his 100 is wrong, still keeping it real.
They keep it 100. All right. I like it.
This is College Football Playoff Selection Day, presented by AT&T.
The field is set. National semifinals are set. It will be Alabama, Michigan State in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. Capital One Orange Bowl will have number 1 Clemson against number 4 Oklahoma. You know the guys, Joey Galloway, David Pollack, Kirk Herbstreit, Reese Davis. People all across the Fruity Plain will join us coming up. Let's start with the number 1 team in Clemson and Oklahoma. I think there's a real school of thought out there. Oklahoma's favored in the game, at least out of the gate, that the Sooners are playing better than anybody. They're used to the style of offense that they'll see from Clemson. What is it about Deshaun Watson that will give Oklahoma the biggest problems?
His decision-making. He is so familiar with this offense. He does such a great job of not just making plays. He's one of these quarterbacks, because of his preparation, the relentless amount of time that he puts into getting his offense ready. He gets out of the bad plays. Remember, we used to say that about Andrew Luck. It's not only the checks that he makes the big plays for the touchdowns, how he avoids a disastrous play. That's a big part of what he brings to the offense. And then just his playmaking ability. Anytime you have a quarterback who can run and throw, and Wayne Gallman back there running as well, there's always a numbers advantage. And that's what Oklahoma's been dealing with in the Big 12 all year against the TCUs and the Baylors. So they're familiar with it. But with 4 back there, it's a little bit of a different deal because of how many big plays he can make with his legs and with his arm. Guy is throwing the ball as well as he has his entire career right now.
And I think people sometimes get that twisted when they watch him run. They're like, oh, he's a mobile quarterback. He's a quarterback first.
Yes.
They do a lot of design runs with him because they have to.
It's numbers advantage.
Numbers advantage, Gallman going one way, him going the other way. But he's a pass-first guy. He's going to sit back in the pocket. He's going to deliver the football on time. He throws the best deep ball, in my opinion, in college football. Finds guys open, hits them in strides, let them run after the catch. Smart, poised. There's nothing he doesn't have. I think we'll talk about it later in the show, but I think he's my Heisman favorite because of that and because of what he's able to been doing. For Clemson, with the injuries, the inexperience, he's just been able to continue to keep him on his back, and they've ridden him the whole way.
When you talk about dual-threat quarterbacks, usually you talk about guys that have to run the ball to make plays. Deshaun Watson could stand in the pocket and be as good as any throwing quarterback in the country, and that's what separates him. That's why when you look at this matchup and you look at what you have to deal with Deshaun Watson, he can sit in the pocket and pick you apart. And that separates him from every other dual-threat quarterback in the entire country.
That's a great point. I think the other thing that would concern me, if I were Clemson, something they're going to have to deal with, is their offensive line with 5 new starters has been a great story. But they don't necessarily in that scheme try to blow people off the line of scrimmage. They're just trying to kind of cover them up and rely on the zone read and Gallman's vision to be able to make plays. They're going up against a totally different deal now with Charles Walker, Charles Tapper, Stryker coming off the edge, the linebacker play with Dominique Alexander. This is a real deal. By far, in my opinion, the best front that they'll have dealt with, including Notre Dame. So that's different. How they'll match up front is something that they're going to have to deal with.
That D-line can't just cut it loose. And that's the other part of having a dual-threat quarterback that can run. D-lineman, David, you know this. Now you have to stay in your lane. You just can't pin your ears back and come get this guy.
It's boring. Hate rushing those quarterbacks.
Stay in your lane.
Eric Stryker sometimes is able to break the rules from time to time. That'll be fun to see in the open field, and it'll be a challenge for Deshaun Watson. And in the midst of that Clemson pizza party, the Tiger quarterback visited with Tom Rinaldi.
Deshaun, we'll get to the matchup against Oklahoma, but how do you describe the scene that unfolded here today when the rankings were released?
It was awesome. You know, we have the best fans in the country. Like you said, I think it's like over 20,000 people showed up and, you know, just having fun and enjoying this time. You know, you never know when this time or this moment is going to come back again. So why not enjoy it now? And that's what we did today.
A rematch of the team that you faced a year ago in a bowl game when you guys won handily in beating Oklahoma. How is this team different, and how do you think the Sooners are different?
Our team, you know, different, just, you know, different players, different mindset, and, you know, we have a lot of guys with experience and a lot of guys that are, you know, motivated. You know, with Oklahoma, they're probably the same way. You know, it's a new team, you know, new motivation, and, you know, each year is just a new challenge. So, you know, it's going to be a challenge down there. It's going to be a fun game.
After a game week after week after week, how do you manage this space of time until December 31st?
Just keep life simple. Just take it one day at a time and just enjoy it. You know, I'll probably be traveling a little bit and, you know, just enjoying my time and just enjoying the ride. You know, this is what I dream for, and, you know, just try to get healthy again and make sure everyone is staying focused and get ready to, you know, go for this, you know, next ride.
How do you explain, Deshaun, the performance of an offensive line where all 5 starters had to be replaced and you guys were able to create an undefeated regular season?
It just shows you how our team is. You know, it's all about love and the coaching staff we have, and just the people that, you know, just take them in, and you know, just the leadership on this team and everyone just buying into the process. You know, all 5 of those guys made the All ACC team, and you know, it's been a blessing, and you know, just keep working and keep going.
Widely expected that you'll be in New York as one of the Heisman finalists. What are you most looking forward to about that trip? We talked last night. It's a place you've never been.
Right. Just probably that. Just seeing the big lights and the big buildings. And, you know, me and my mom never been to New York City, and that's one of the places she always wanted to go, other than Vegas. And, and so, you know, having the opportunity is going to be a blessing. And, you know, I fully enjoy it. Win or lose, you know, I'm just going to enjoy the moment.
What did you learn this season, now that the regular season is concluded, that you couldn't have known when you took the first snap all the way back in September?
Just really, I mean, every game is a new challenge. No matter who the opponent is or what their record is, you know, we're going to get everyone's best shot. And, you know, just keep sticking to the basics and listen to what Coach Swinney and all the coaching staff have and enjoy the process. And it's all about preparation each and every week. And if you do that, prepare during the week, you get the outcome you want on Saturdays.
A huge end of this month for you in the semifinal and a huge week this week. We appreciate the time, Deshaun.
Thank you.
Deshaun Watson.
All right, Tom, you know if Deshaun gets his mom to Vegas, she can get her Tigers in 2.5 right now. Paul Feinbaum and Danny Cannell now joining us. Paul, I'm going to start with you. No real drama in who the 4 teams are. Oklahoma slips to number 4. Ty Darlington from the Sooners said of the slip, I like that. What do you think of it?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I think this committee, Reese, was affected by what they saw last. They're human beings, just like all of us. We started coalescing about what would happen today, and we were right, that Michigan State would go up, Oklahoma went down. I think that's really it. I don't think there's much more drama. I think Jeff Long took Alabama off the table as the number 1. He put Clemson in there, and I think they got it right. We're cynics. Well, at least I am, I should say, maybe Danny as well. But this committee did a good job. Did they need to meet for 6 weeks and go over all this and put us through apoplexy? Probably not, but that's the way it goes. But in the end, it's a great Final Four.
Yeah, I totally agree, Paul. I think when you look at it, I think when you look at where Oklahoma winded up, it's pretty clear to me what happened. I mean, if you look at the resumes, they went with the most deserving teams. If you stack them up once against each other. Don't forget, last year, Ohio State almost got left out. Why? Because they lost to Virginia Tech. You cannot forget the fact that Oklahoma lost to Texas. It's by far the ugliest loss out of the one-loss teams that are sitting there in Michigan State and Alabama. And I think when you stack them up against one another, I think it's very clear that the committee got it right. But my favorite thing about it is it's what's your flavor? What do you like to watch? Because you're going to have 2 high-powered offenses going against each other in Clemson, Oklahoma, and you're going to have 2 smash-mouth teams facing each other in Michigan State, Alabama.
No, last year we had intriguing matchups, but this is even more special, I think, the Saban-Michigan State issue. And I think Michigan State will like the role. I know Reese talked about Oklahoma, but Michigan State will love the fact that they're already being written off. The FPI has given them very little chance. The odds makers are. And on the other side, it's one of the most intriguing matchups of the college football season. Oklahoma and Clemson, a rematch of last year's 40-6 disaster for Bob Stoops. And Bob Stoops has shocked the world. He's shocked me probably more than anyone else, the fact that he's back in here. And who wouldn't like, and I think the committee thought the same thing, who wouldn't like an Oklahoma-Alabama national championship game?
Yeah, if we get that, it'll be an outstanding matchup. But I do look at Alabama, and I think they are the biggest winner with this draw, the way things shake out, because they're facing a team in Michigan State that plays right into their wheelhouse.
Exactly.
And Connor Cook will probably be the best quarterback they've faced this season, but he's not the type of quarterback that gives Alabama's defense too much trouble, because they'll be able to contain him in the pocket and they can rough him up. It's going to be up to Connor Cook to make sure he's, up to speed on every single blitz, where to get rid of the football. The problem is Alabama will probably be able to generate pressure on him with just 4 guys with their defensive front. So I can't wait to see that matchup. And then Baker Mayfield versus Deshaun Watson. There's really not a whole lot more you can say about these 2 quarterbacks going against each other. Deshaun Watson, very cool, calm, collected, distributes the ball all over, dynamic with the football. And then you've got Baker Mayfield, who's got this swagger. He's coming out there, running around a la Johnny Manziel, making plays from wherever. And, he's had some signature moments this season, so that one should be fascinating to watch too.
And Reese, the biggest upset of the college football season. Danny and I agree.
Well, I'm sure that won't last very long. Paul Feinbaum and Danny Cannell weighing in and checking in on these national semifinals. Now, Michigan State, Danny alluded to this. Connor Cook had a little chance to get healthy, too, because that shoulder appeared to be bothering him last night. They beat Oregon at home on September 12th, won it by a field goal. Connor Cook injured his shoulder just before the Spartans went to Columbus to take on Ohio State, and without their leader, they knocked off the Buckeyes. Michael Geiger knocked that field goal through to win it. Then they won their second Big Ten title in the last 3 years. Mark D'Antonio with Marty Smith.
Coach, first, congratulations going to the college football playoff. Before we get to Alabama, let's take a look back at Saturday night. How did that last drive exemplify your team's season?
Well, I just think we talked a lot about mental toughness here. And, first of all, our defense played tremendously the whole game, really played well in the red zone. And then offensively, we just sort of willed it that last drive, sort of grounded out. And I think we threw one pass. But great effort by our football team and our offensive line and tight ends, fullbacks, running back, and play selection and our coaches. And it was just you could just sort of feel the tide start to turn a little bit. So we had an edge, and we just kept pounding it.
You've been very clear about goals this year, very lofty. What's your message to your team, Ben?
Well, I think you always want to try and go a little bit farther than you've gone before. I think that's the message we take as people. Last year we ended up number 5 in the country, and I think 11-2, but didn't quite win the championship. And so that was the goal, to win the East, to win the Big Ten championship, and get in these playoffs. And now we have an opportunity to go farther, and that's our goal, that's our mindset, and we'll measure up.
And you are going farther. You get to face Coach Saban and the Crimson Tide. I'm sure you've already started feverishly studying, even though we're just a few minutes removed from the announcement. Watching them from afar, what do you see, and how much do you relish this opportunity?
I've just caught bits and pieces of their games, because a lot of times they're on when we're not, or whatever the case, that type of thing. So, but they're going to be very well coached. They're going to be disciplined. They're going to play with a lot of toughness. They run the ball downhill. Play great defense, great special teams. So that's what I know. That's what I've studied here before, and there's a lot of similarities in the things that we've done here or tried to do here, and the things that he's done.
I loved what you said after you won the Big Ten on Saturday night. This team knows how to win. How proud are you of the culture you've created here?
Well, our culture started in 2007 when we came here, so there's a lot of people that are involved in that, invested. So it's the 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I got to mention them all. Teams that have come here and done something, but very, very special. But we've won a lot of games here in the last 5 years. I think we've won 11-plus games maybe 5 times now. So I think we're ready for the next step, and that's what this has been about, trying to build a foundation and continue to try and raise the level of performance.
We wish you well in the Cotton Bowl, Coach. Congratulations. Thank you. Guys?
And in fact, he's the only coach to have 5 11-win seasons in 6 years. Clemson's the number 1 seed. Alabama at number 2. Oklahoma and Michigan State also making the field.
The regular season has tested, eliminated, and ultimately chosen the 4 surviving teams for the college football playoff.
Touchdown, MSU!
4 teams, 4 chances, 1 champion. The college football playoff on ESPN. Bob Stoops, Baker Mayfield, Samaje Perine, Oklahoma. Welcome to the college football playoff.
College football playoff selection day. Clemson and Oklahoma in one semifinal, Alabama and Michigan State in the other. Chris Fowler joining us now. Chris has called games for all 4 of these teams, and we'll call a national semifinal and also the championship game on January 11th. Chris, let's start. I don't know if there was any real drama. What was your reaction to seeing Michigan State vault past Oklahoma, at least for one spot?
Not surprised, Reese. I think when you look at this year in the long view, it's going to be more exceptional than typical. I think we'll have chaos most years like we had last year. This committee, a bunch of smart people with hundreds of hours of prep, basically made a decision that any fan could make, and that only the little piece of controversy, that flip-flop, I can tell you that the Sooner veterans were thrilled by the so-called snub, the drop to number 4. Baker Mayfield told me this morning they are thrilled to get a chance to have to pay back Clemson for that bowl loss last year. Oklahoma had 5 losses a year ago. They paid back the first 4 teams, and their self-destruction in the bowl game is something they're eager to repay. As for Clemson, underdogs, but they are going to feel supremely confident, I promise you, when they take the field against that Sooner team.
And also be a rested team, something that's much needed for Clemson, as we saw them sort of hang on in some spots coming down the stretch. Alabama and Michigan State, Spartans wind up in a very familiar and a position that they like a lot. Underdog, almost double figures right out of the gate now. How does that play into Michigan State's favor in your judgment?
Well, perfectly. You heard Mark D'Antonio talk about all the intangibles that make up that Spartan mythology and a lot of truth behind it. But having seen all these playoff teams multiple times, I'm really struck by Michigan State because I think they're the outlier in this group from the sense that they have not really hit their top gear. Now, it's nice when you can win 12 games without hitting your top gear. They've been able to improve as a defense. They've gotten that typical Spartan edge back, I think, in the last 3 games, beginning in Columbus. They've gotten healthier in the back end, less susceptible to big plays, offensively done just enough. But I think Connor Cook's going to have to hit top gear, make downfield throws, and they're going to have to play by far their best game of the season to hang in against Alabama, but maybe they're capable of that.
You know, the resume certainly justifies their move, but we mentioned earlier on, the eye test is where you could sort of ding Michigan State. Some of it was certainly because of injuries, but they had close games against teams like Rutgers and Purdue. They had to pull away from Indiana in the last 5 minutes, but apparently in this case, the resume trumped the eye test. I've always said this is more art than science, so I'm okay with that. But sometimes I don't mind people saying this team's just better than the other team. Which side do you weigh on in terms of resume versus eye test?
That's a tough call, isn't it? I think I think that you tend to look at the resume because the eye test is very subjective. Having said that, you know, Michigan State, you can point to toughness at the end of games, the long drive against Ohio State to kick that field goal to win it, the incredible 22-play drive, 9 minutes off the clock against Iowa to win it. That's one of the greatest drives in the history of college football. So, you know, there's eye test in the first 50 minutes, and then there's eye test in the last 10 minutes when it's winning time. And Michigan State's had a tremendous ability to produce clutch plays and toughness in the last 10 minutes of games. I think it's tougher to drive the ball 22 plays on Alabama's defense, which is why Connor Cook's going to have his best game of the season.
You know, last night when you and Kirk became aware of that 22-play drive, you were locked down on Clemson, North Carolina. Herbstreit had one eye on one game. He was multitasking up there. I think he'd seen every play, hadn't he?
We do that. I mean, we can keep an eye on things. When you think that there's a possibility that the 2 semifinal opponents are going to come together, believe me, we're watching more than 2 games at a time up there. But our eye was on the field down there and to see if Clemson could finish things off. I'll tell you what's interesting from a different perspective. I think you're going to have 3 of the top 4 vote getters in the Heisman race, the exception being Christian McCaffrey of Stanford. But Henry and Watson and Mayfield, nothing official, but I would expect that they will probably finish 3 of the top 4 vote getters in the Heisman, the great quarterback matchup, you know, down there in Miami. And then obviously the favorite for the Heisman Trophy, Derrick Henry, against a very tough Spartan defense. The other subplot in the nightcap, I think, is, you know, Saban against former assistants. And Jim McElwain, the latest to come up on the short end of that. It may have nothing to do with the outcome in Arlington. Probably won't, but D'Antonio, as a former assistant to Saban, I don't think any of them have ever come close to beating Nick on the scoreboard. So that's something that'll be talked about a lot between now and New Year's Eve.
I think by margin of victory last night was the closest for Florida and Alabama with McElwain.
Chris, talking about having an eye on another game and the game we're watching, I think that one of those referees may have had his eye on another game.
I set the table, and now it's okay for you to take a swing, too?
I take a swing.
If you think about the crazy season that we've had and all the bizarre one-of-a-kind finishes around the country and how they played in, the Michigan State scooping up of the attempted punt at Michigan, running that play in there, that's what gets them in the playoff, and all the other twists and turns that have delivered us these 4 teams. It really is remarkable, and we can only hope that not bad calls. We don't need bad calls in the playoffs, but more of the chaos and confusion that has marked this season.
Chris, we'll let you get to brunch, but they're in Times Square. We got to get out of here.
I'm gonna catch a matinee back here if you don't mind.
Broadway play, a little buffet.
Escorted beyond the velvet ropes into a private area, I'm sure.
You guys keep grinding away for a few more hours. I'm eager to see these another New Year's Six matchups.
Yes, sir. We'll text you, let you know how it works out.
It comes up in less than an hour and a half. We'll get the rest of the rankings and the New Year's Six matchup. All right, Chris Fowler joining us from New York City. He'll call the national championship game, and Bob Stoops hopes that he will be in that game. Stoops turning around the Sooners from last year's non-Oklahoma-like finish with 5 losses to roaring down the stretch in the judgment of many. The team playing better than anybody as they go into this playoff, and Bob Stoops joins us now on the phone. And Bob, thanks for being with us, and congratulations on a Big 12 championship. What's your reaction to getting the 4 seed and opening the playoff against Clemson?
Of course, we're excited about it. The opportunity to continue to compete for the national championship's what you want. The message to my team will absolutely be it isn't about getting to the playoff, it's about winning it. And so hopefully we can do our work here in the next 3 weeks or so and get ourselves prepared to win it.
I know it's more talking point than something that becomes tangible on the field when you play a team that you've played before. You guys have avenged all of your losses from a year ago and done so in many cases emphatically. What role, at least in terms of intensity, mental approach, does having going up against Clemson after what happened in the bowl game last year have on your team?
Well, each year you have your own identity from year to year. It's a different team from year to year. But I can't say that, that won't be on players' minds. It should be. Same with us as coaches. They beat the heck out of us, and a year ago. So we've got to do a better job, players and coaches together, to give ourselves a chance to go in there and play an excellent Clemson team. A team that's won 16 straight games is pretty. That's special.
Bob, your team has been so efficient, close to the top of the efficiency rankings on offense and defense. There are metrics out there that say that your team's the best team in the country. What changed after the Texas game for Oklahoma?
Growth, maturity, improvement. We really, the players, give them credit, had a great mindset to continue to push and practice. Maybe my best practice team that we've had in 17 years, just the way they go at it. Coaches, assistants did a great job with them. Players, though, willingness to improve. And, I don't think in fact, I know I haven't in 17 years, a team that changed so dramatically from the first game, not even this, the Texas game, from the first game to the back half of the season. Offensive linemen, some two freshman guys just really grew up and came together. Receivers grew and got better, and the whole team just kind of kept evolving that way and really, did a great job just improving.
How would you describe the influence, the impact that Baker Mayfield has had in developing that type of culture and that type of competitive spirit?
Yeah, there's no denying it. I mean, Baker just has that infectious enthusiasm, and it just affects everybody. It rubs off on everybody, and just has such an ability to make plays. I think maybe everyone sees the way he scrambles to run and then scrambles to throw, but he has such an accurate, quick arm. He has such a quick release and such a feel for the game that he's just truly special.
Bob, as you look at this now, and you talked about how you reinvented or went back to some things you'd done earlier in your career after last season, how gratifying is it for you to see it pay off with this opportunity in the playoff?
Yeah, it's gratifying for sure. I've always believed in this offense, and I've always believed you can run the football successfully in this offense. And I think over the last 7 games, I believe I'm right, we've rushed the football more than anybody in the country in the last 7 games. So they can be blended together the way we have, and so it's been great. Lincoln Riley and our whole offensive staff have done a great job, but also Mike, my brother Mike, and the whole defensive staff. We've played as good a defense as we played here in a long, long time. I believe we lead the league in about 7 or 8 different categories. So hopefully we can keep that going.
There's some parallels to last year when a hot, talented team came in as a 4 seed and ended up winning a national championship. You've won the national championship. You've played in title games. What differences do you anticipate knowing that this is now a 2-step process as opposed to the old BCS championship game that you guys were involved in so many times?
Well, the first thing I think is just, a singular, of course, focus on this game. This is, again, a team that beat us bad a year ago, the #1 team in the country right now. We've got to be at our best, New Year's Eve to play these guys. And that'll be our mission to make sure, we do everything we can in the next few weeks to be in that position.
Bob, congratulations on the Big 12 championship and making it into the college football playoff. It's been a great run. Enjoy New York City. I know you're going to be there for a few days.
Thanks, Reese. Good to be with you.
All right, Bob Stoops, head coach of the Sooners, and we alluded to this, talking to Bob about how the Sooners have been able to avenge losses from a year ago, many times in emphatic fashion, though they had to stop a 2-point conversion against TCU to get the win, and now they get an opportunity against a Clemson team that beat them 40-6 last year, but that was without Baker Mayfield at quarterback. It's a different style of offense that Oklahoma was running. So as you look at this right now, what similarities or what can be drawn from last year's meeting between Oklahoma and Clemson, David?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything. I mean, I think you can point to motivation, but then you're going to tell me that Clemson's not motivated to try to win a national championship. And I understand that. I think Oklahoma's been talked about as being one of the hottest teams in the country. I think obviously some people will remember that and they'll think about that. But, again, I think all the chips are on the table, all the things are on the line. But just how about Bob Stoops bringing in Lincoln Riley, the change of philosophy in offense? I think, too, the shift, because they finally got to the Pirine part of the schedule, I guess, middle of the season.
Post-Texas.
Yeah, and that's when they started getting it, and they started running the football, and then you use Shepard, Mayfield being able to run the football, and you saw this offense morph and develop, and that's when I really think they took that next step. But a great offseason, a great hire by Lincoln Riley, and Baker Mayfield, the best free agent acquisition in the history of the world. I mean, unbelievable.
I agree. I think on one hand, that last year's game doesn't have anything to do with this year, but on the other hand, you just heard him. They will bring this up for 25 days. They're going to remind these players, many of who were on that field and lost to Clemson. I'm a big believer when these big layoffs in bowl games, I know Clemson's motivated. All these teams want to win, but some teams are more upset. Some teams show up because there's something that really is driving them and unifying them. That'll be the case with Oklahoma. In my opinion, it's going to be up to Clemson. And I think Dabo to find unique ways to get his team to match the intensity that I think Oklahoma will show up with, just because, ironically enough, they ended up getting blown out by him last year in a bowl game.
Yeah, I talk about him being the favorite. That's sort of what I was alluding to earlier with your motivations. As you go into these games, and coaches, we all been around them, they'll come in and put these motivational speeches on the board and write things up with stats. You're getting blown out by a team. You don't have to say much about that. Yep. You come in, you're already angry, and they're going to push that on these kids all for the next month before they play. They will talk about that. There was concern about Oklahoma early on. I kept saying, "Where's Pirine? I mean, where is that run game?" And there was concern, would they get out of the Big 12 without that running game? And once they turn that switch, that's why we're all talking about this. That's why you talk about, you say they're the most complete team. Mm-hmm. It's because Baker Mayfield and the fact that they've run for 300 yards a game since Texas. Now, this offense, who do you come in and stop? If you're an offense and you're one-sided, you look at Alabama, you say stop the run, you got a chance to win. You look at Oklahoma, because they run it and they have Baker Mayfield, there's not just one phase that defeats Oklahoma.
Well, they run it with 3 different guys, too. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's not just Henry. Henry gets pretty much all the run.
The two-back look with Mixon and Pirine together.
And then Mayfield running. I mean, they got 3 guys that can do some damage.
And just creating things off schedules we've seen Mayfield do throughout. And I think what we're talking about here is not that somebody's going to show up without motivation. No. It's that edge. Exactly. It's the edge that you try to find there. And Oklahoma certainly won't have to look far to find it. Oklahoma and Clemson in one of the national semifinals. Going to give you the start times for both of these national semifinals coming up later on. And the rest of the New Year's Six Bowls. That's quite a reward, too. That's coming up in the 3 o'clock Eastern hour.
Welcome back to College Football Playoff Selection Day, presented by AT&T.
College football playoff will look like this. Clemson and Oklahoma will play in one national semifinal on New Year's Eve on ESPN. That'll be in the Capital One Orange Bowl. Alabama and Michigan State also on New Year's Eve in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. Kickoff times are coming. The championship game played in Glendale, Arizona, Monday, January 11th, 8:30 Eastern Time. Now, 3 of those 4 teams have a guy that we believe will be among the contenders for the Heisman Trophy, likely finalists. Votes are due tomorrow, by the way. Derrick Henry set a single-season rushing record, breaking Herschel Walker's mark, as Henry went for nearly 200 against Florida, and he's just short of 2,000 on the year. Deshaun Watson's an ACC championship game record, had more than 400 yards, responsible for 5 touchdowns as the Tigers held off North Carolina to finish a perfect season. And then there was Christian McCaffrey, who just went off, broke Barry Sanders' record for all-purpose yards. He did everything, including throwing a touchdown pass for the Cardinal last night. So McCaffrey has been brilliant a different way throughout the season. Derrick Henry has been the sledgehammer. Easy to look at Alabama and say, where would their offense be without him? And then, of course, you have Deshaun Watson, who's been able to, as David's alluded to, navigate the new offensive line for Clemson. He lost one of his best receivers. Where do you think we stand in your judgment right now in stacking up the Heisman contenders?
I love the fact that all these guys made a huge statement yesterday. They put their best foot forward on the last weekend in the championship games. So we had a chance to really see these guys in the end. And you talk about Derrick Henry, McCaffrey, Deshaun Watson, terrific games to judge these guys by. I think that if you look at what McCaffrey's done all season long, the way he's carried his team, offensively and special teams. In 2 phases out of the 3, he's carried his team. I don't know how you go away from saying that he deserves the Heisman Trophy.
So you like McCaffrey? He's number 1.
Well, I am a voter now, so I'm not allowed to actually
look at you! Hey. Look at you, Joseph Scott.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're not allowed to say who you voted for. Is what
I like them all.
I appreciate you for following the game.
Got you.
I like them.
I'm a voter as well, so I won't tell you who I voted for either. But if I was telling you who I was going to vote for, then I would think number 4 for Clemson would be high on the list. And I say that because, listen, when you look at Derrick Henry, he just broke Herschel Walker's record. That's pretty solid. When you look at McCaffrey, Barry Sanders' record, that's pretty good. When I look at Deshaun Watson, I think if he's not on this team, I think this team has 3 or 4 losses. I think he's that important. He has to run it. He has to throw it. He has to make all the plays. I'm so impressed with every facet of his game in the big moments against every team. The whole season, he's been really consistent. I think Deshaun Watson is the best player in college football.
Man, this is going to be the hardest vote I think I've ever had to put down.
I haven't cast mine yet.
I haven't. You could make a case for all 3 of those guys.
Absolutely, you could.
You guys just said everything. Henry, what he's done. You talked about what McCaffrey's meant as far as carrying his team. Look at Alabama. I mean, Alabama, since the Ole Miss game, they put their offense on his shoulders, and he's been able to handle things. What David is saying about Deshaun Watson, I mean, he's doing everything. He's carrying his team. He's Marcus Mariota reinvented again now for Clemson, or maybe even Charlie Ward reincarnated with what he's doing for this Clemson offense and the way he handles himself. But Christian McCaffrey.
So in honor of game day, who you got?
Christian McCaffrey, for me, is probably the most impressive all-purpose back I've seen since Reggie Bush, who you used that comparison. It's very, very hard. I just wonder if enough voters nationally see him at Stanford to give him the respect that he deserves, because it wasn't just what he did yesterday. As you said, Joey.
Since nobody wants to pick a guy, does Keenan Reynolds get to the show? Does he get invited?
I hope that'd be
He's
great.
deserving.
I think he's deserving too, but I don't think he will.
I'm not sure he will, but he's certainly deserving. I'll tell you another guy, and we also are prisoners of the recent, about Baker Mayfield. You think Oklahoma's playing in one of the playoff games?
He should be there.
Mayfield?
He should be in
there. You don't want to see Keenan Reynolds show up in the helicopter?
I do.
I mean, that's the part I want to see, is Keenan Reynolds showing up in the helicopter after the Army-Navy game is probably as exciting as the trophy itself to me right now.
So you haven't voted yet, though?
I have not voted.
You haven't voted yet?
I have not voted yet.
Have you voted?
I have voted, yeah.
So it's pretty clear what you've done.
No, I didn't tell you who
I've not voted yet, so that's why I'm saying.
So you're leading in the clubhouse right now would be, if you were to vote,
leader in the clubhouse means it's over.
I'm just, no.
I've got to go to this thing and interview these guys. So I'm definitely, not only do I vote, I'm like, so hey, how are you? Good to see you.
It's okay.
But
hey, you had a great season.
I like them all. I mean, I don't know who I'm going to vote for.
You know, it sounds like you're straddling the fence, not you.
Who
I mean, us generally. I mean, I think generally you look at it, all of these guys, you can make a case for all of them.
Exactly.
All of them really deserving. And you mentioned, you know, where would this team be?
This is our best segment right here.
Where would Alabama be without Henry? Where would Stanford be without McCaffrey?
Yep.
All of these guys have been integral. Their teams would not be in the playoffs.
Stanford loses 2 phases, though. Stanford loses 2 phases of their game now, 2 out of 3.
If it's all this close, and you have one team that hasn't lost a game, does that just sway anybody?
Yeah, I mean, that just helps.
They're all this close, and they're all that. What's the defining line? You got one team that's undefeated and number 1 in the country.
It's one of the reasons why, at least in terms of individual performance, Dalvin Cook deserves to be in this mix. But I think that sometimes there are extraordinary circumstances where a guy can lose a few games and still be in it. Maybe he's clearly the best. But you have all of these guys at the top who not only are that, much like Dalvin Cook, but they also have their teams winning championships. So that can be a separator because that's the idea. It's not to pile up stats, it's to help your team win.
Who does
your team win at an elite level.
With that being said, who does more than McCaffrey?
No one.
Deshaun Watson does.
Well, I think he does just.
We're talking 2 phases now. There's 3 phases of football. We're talking.
He throws and he runs. Deshaun Watson. That's 2 phases.
No. But phases of football: offense, defense, special teams. One guy is carrying 2 of those.
One guy touches the ball every time.
That's right.
Deshaun Watson.
You can't stop Deshaun Watson from touching the ball every time. If you choose not to punt the ball to Christian McCaffrey or kick, you can take care of that. It also helps.
You got to punt it and you got to kick it, Reese.
Exactly.
You can't go the whole game without doing either one.
You can kick it away from him.
Yeah, you're right. Go for it on 4th down.
In the end, I didn't say. I said you could kick it away from him.
On kickoffs, you got to kick it to him.
In the end, this is all great. RD still hasn't given an opinion.
Neither have I.
Okay.
I'm high.
I'm going to tell you this because I think I'm trying to follow the rules. The Heisman Trust would not like for us to reveal who we're going to vote for. But let me tell you this.
Or the Heisman Trust?
Okay.
Which way are you going there?
Heisman Trust. Nick Scala is our producer.
If you had a lean.
Okay, well, here, let me tell you. I'm not going to give you a lean, but here's what I will tell you. I'm predisposed to think along the lines that Joey does with McCaffrey because I know this is not politically correct.
I like giving you fist bump. Give me something on that,
Okay, I'll give you on that. But maybe we're not saying this because Reggie Bush returned his Heisman. Matt Leinert's a great friend of mine. I voted for Reggie twice because I tend to think, maybe it's my childhood, thinking of guys who are electric, Johnny Rodgers, people like that, that's what a Heisman winner is. Mm-hmm. And so McCaffrey carries some serious weight with me because of that.
The last thing that you could say about this, just to kind of put it in perspective for each of these individuals, whether it's Alabama, Derrick Henry, Deshaun Watson, what we've seen with McCaffrey, when you put some of their numbers up with either their own school, where they've had Heisman winners, they're on the same level, if not higher, including Baker Mayfield with Jason White and some of the candidates that have won there at OU. So that's why it's so hard. All these guys are having years where if they were in a different year, they would be able to win it. They'd be able to walk away with a victory. So it's a tough year to vote.
And let me tell you this, because I don't want to give the impression that I'm giving any kind of lean. You know what the chances are that Alabama would be playing in a playoff game without Derrick Henry? 0. Mm-hmm. 0.
Can we say that about all the candidates?
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, I don't know if you can say it about all of them. And in fairness, I think that McCaffrey might be the one that carries the least weight in that regard to me. Yeah, I would say it about Deshaun Watson.
Hold up, say that again.
Stanford's going to get theirs on the ground. They're going to with their offensive line.
And did you see Hogan's numbers last night?
Did
you see his numbers last night? You can't say that about McCaffrey.
Did you see Deshaun Watson's numbers last night?
It's
Hogan's numbers last night.
You put Barry Sanders in there, and he's a good back. It's not the same. I mean, Barry Sanders is a good back.
No doubt. No, and nobody's disputing that. I'm not disputing that.
I don't think they're nearly as effective.
I'm just saying it's hard. I think for the other candidates, we've seen Stanford make a game-winning drive in a big game without him having a big impact. I'm not saying he shouldn't win it because of this. I'm just saying if you're saying
we've seen Bama do that without Derrick Henry being a big impact against Tennessee. Coker hit 2 deep balls down the sideline against Tennessee.
He scored the winning touchdown
to win the game.
But he scored
My point is, it was the 2 big plays by Coker and the receivers outside that moved that drive.
We haven't seen Clemson do it without Watson.
He scored.
And I agree with that. But you cannot say that Stanford is the same. There's no one
nobody
else
said that.
You know
nobody said they were. Nobody said they were the same.
I take my fist bump back.
Nobody. You know what's terrible about this?
I didn't say they were the same.
What's terrible about this is while you're elevating one guy, you're almost trying to put down other guys.
They're all.
Which is wrong.
I don't want to.
I agree with that.
I don't want to do that.
Nor do I. And I'm just saying if you have to rank them. You have to rank them.
You have to rank them at some point. But you know what? We'll give you some more syrup with y'all's waffle.
Did you vote? Did you vote last night or
I can't.
before the games?
I can't tell you. No.
Did you wait for the games were played?
I voted today. Thank you very much.
All right.
So don't think I didn't wait to the games.
I mean, you leave game day right after game day's over. You get. I'm just making sure you're still.
I had to come here. I didn't have the wheels up, service in the media.
Here we go. Here we go.
All I have to say is I'd like to remind America that I did vote for a number 5 who wore a similar colored uniform who plays very much like the guy that Joseph Galloway likes.
Mama's been here working actually.
Hey, Eric Stryker with Scout Ponder. Eric Stryker, the great pass rusher for Oklahoma. That's what Scout has to say about all of the Selection Day drama. And we're going to turn our attention to the Jimmy V Classic on Tuesday night, a tremendous doubleheader. College Game Day will be there as well for basketball. West Virginia and Virginia, top 20 matchup at 7, followed by Maryland and UConn at 9 Eastern.
I think Oklahoma is going to surprise everybody. I think Oklahoma is going to end up emerging.
I think their offense is going to come back to where they were several years ago.
We'll find out how good they are. The second week of the season, they got to go into Knoxville and play Tennessee.
It's all come down to one play. Mayfield waiting on the snap, keeps it himself. He's in, touchdown. What a gutsy quarterback he's been in the fourth quarter and overtime. Oklahoma comes from behind and upsets what looked like a sure win for Tennessee.
How about that fight? Touchdown!
Last time I checked, you're allowed to tackle, put your shoulder pads on him instead of two-hand touch. Awful.
Pressure in his face! And down he goes! An enormous play for Texas.
They kicked us and won the football game, and there's not much else to say about it.
What are we supposed to make of Oklahoma now?
Do they have an opportunity with teams that they still have to play?
Mayfield scrambling, fires to the end zone for a touchdown to Flowers.
Oklahoma might be the dark horse.
Kohlhausen on the run, lobs it, it's knocked down.
At number 3, the Oklahoma Sooners.
Right now, Oklahoma is the best team in the Big 12.
Winner take all for the Big 12 title. Bust loose, Samaje Perine. That's why you got to feed the big fella. It's Mixon's turn for a long touchdown for the Sooners. The Sooners make this a bedlam beatdown.
That's what I think people are looking to and say, man, I think Oklahoma is the team that's built to win this thing.
Let's take a look at the impact players in the college football playoff, brought to you by Chick-fil-A. Deshaun Watson put up huge numbers, 3rd in the nation in total QBR. Derrick Henry, we mentioned him breaking Herschel Walker's record, just 14 yards short of 2,000. Baker Mayfield spinning the magic bean for 35 touchdowns this year.
Spinning.
And Connor Cook, 34 wins as a starter, a Michigan State record in touchdown passes, and he led that 22-play drive, while certainly the shoulder was not 100%. That resulted in Michigan State beating Iowa last night, winning the Big Ten and getting a spot in the college football playoff. Now, all of those guys, offensive guys, but defensive guys can have an impact in the playoff for sure. Eric Stryker of Oklahoma will certainly be a guy who's ready to get after Deshaun Watson, but we first see the kinder, gentler side of the Sooner pass rusher with our good friend Scout Ponder.
All right, Eric, you know where you're at now at number 4 in the nation. So is this what you expected it would be, or where'd you think you'd be?
I mean, I really wasn't, we were taking a day at a time through the whole season. And if you take it back to the spring, I mean, being in the college football playoffs was the last thing on our mind, coming off a, embarrassing loss and, other things happening in the spring that we set as a priority. This wasn't even, football wasn't even, even thought about at that point. We were worried about the character of the team and getting things right, for the university. But I can tell you that no doubt that those things helped to put us where we are now, as far as coming closer as a team, as far as guys maturing and discipline and focus, and even the captains and the leaders, gaining great leadership skills. So all those things have really helped. But I didn't, and even through the season, we've taken it a week at a time and a day at a time and singular focus each week. And winning the Big 12 was the first thing. And, now we're in a spot, where we want to be. So now I can actually think and talk about it now.
Well, help us understand what you did as one of the leaders of this team to go from the place you were at last spring to now being talked about in the college football playoff?
Well, I know one of the things we wanted to do was change the culture on the team. We thought that the culture on the team was, a little bit selfish. Guys are about me and about self, and trying to get an understanding of that, as a team player, you help yourself individually by being, a great team player, and just trying to get that mentality out of there. And guys, it's just playing for the team, and more a lot focus on the younger guys as far as their focus and discipline and maturing. And I tell you what, it's like, just working on those things throughout the spring has really helped, and I think that was the focus. And I can't, the young guys have really, it's one thing for me as a senior to know who's been here and understand, what's at stake. But when you get the young guys on board and the freshmen and the sophomores that come along, that really help push the team. So we got a very mature team now. Then we had a very disciplined, more focused team than in the past years.
You also had a little bit of adversity this year, right, specifically in that Texas game. I'm sure you've been asked about it a million times. Yeah. In your mind, what changed since that game? Well,
I think, it was a little chin check that we needed, right, to humble us and get to get everybody, minds right. And I thought, that we responded well. I thought far as, being the first aggressor is what we kind of been focusing on, especially after that game. Being the first team to start and be, just being the first to, go off, and just roll from there. And I think that's what we've done good since the Texas game, is not starting slow, starting fast, rolling and keep it going. And it's just been working out. And then losing is not fun at all, and no one wants to be a loser. We all have that winning mentality. So that hurt, and I think it helped us out as far as becoming a better team.
See, I thought we were going to see Scout Ponder instead of Scout's mother Sam, and we're going to see Eric being kinder and gentler. He's ready to play. He will be kind and gentler when he goes against Clemson coming up. We'll talk to 4 playoff teams in Monday Night Football, Cowboys and Redskins. My buddy Ivan Maisel had a great line riding up the Michigan State game. He said when that 22-play drive started, Kirk Cousins was the quarterback at Michigan State.
That's good.
Cousins and the Redskins against the Cowboys, Monday night, 8:15 Eastern Time.
The day has come. The games have been played. The arguments made. The decision final. Oklahoma, Alabama, Clemson, Michigan State. 4 teams, 1 bracket, 1 to be champion.
You're just joining us. Where in the world have you been? College football playoff selection day. Here are the 4 teams all set. The bracket has been filled. It's pretty much standard operating procedure. Clemson went wire to wire as the #1 team to the committee. Alabama and Michigan State will play in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. Michigan State, after winning the Big Ten championship, slipped up ahead of Oklahoma, going from number 5 in last week's rankings to number 3. Sooners did not play this week, slipped back a spot to number 4, and they get a rematch with Clemson in the Capital One Orange Bowl. So those are the semifinals. Just to remind you of a couple of things as you look at these matchups, you'll see numbers 5 through 25, according to the committee rankings, coming up in a little bit less than an hour. That will also let us set the New Year's 6 bowls. In addition to that, we'll also have the kickoff times for the national semifinals. Now, for the second straight year, we have some very compelling matchups to play in the college football playoff, but there's always an outcry for more teams. And in my judgment, there's no question Ohio State could win the national championship if they were in. So could Stanford. So could Notre Dame, I believe. Are you okay with 4, or would you like to see an expansion to 8?
I love 4. I think it creates the drama, it creates suspense, it creates controversy, which I think is great. I don't think just because teams get left out, it's necessarily a bad thing. I think that you can make a very strong argument that our sport is probably as intense a following as any sport in the country. Now, if you went to 8, would it stay that way? probably would, because people are rabid and passionate about this game. But, Joey, at this point, I see it going to 8 at some point. I'm not saying it won't, but I do enjoy where we are right now with the way the committee has been able to shake things down these first 2 years. I like it with 4. Last night mattered.
You're talking to a guy on this side that I'm old school. I didn't even like seeing it go to the playoff in the first place. I like the old bowl system. That's just the way I love to see things go.
Where the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are left out?
If they get left out, they get left out.
You like that?
I hate seeing conference realignment. I think it tears down the sport somewhat. It takes away the rivalry games in a lot of these conferences. So now you guys have forced me into a 4-team playoff, and I enjoyed it last season. It was terrific. And I feel like we can never, ever be satisfied. It's like, okay, 4 was great. Now sign us up for 8. We're going to get to a point where we're asking these kids to play NFL regular season. And we're getting to that 16-game area, and I also don't think they should get paid. So if you start going 16 games, then all of a sudden I got to start thinking, oh,
so
maybe they should get paid.
You like the 2 teams and split national champs and
love it. I love January 1st. You sit down and you watch 9,000 games. Not all 9,000. All 9,000 games on January 1st, one day, play it out.
We're taking January 1st back with this new playoff.
Yeah, but now you're going to the 12th for the
31st we're taking back.
Yeah, the producer's about to say, Galloway, shut up. But now you're going to the 12th with the championship game.
So what about spread offenses? Are those okay, or do we need to just go back to fullback?
You're talking about a guy that didn't even practice during the week.
Can we pass?
However you get the ball to the end zone is fine with me. I just love seeing old school just back in the day.
Good, hard-working.
That was me. Yeah.
Oh, that was all.
Strap it on 3 yards in the cloud of dust.
Just work his darndest and give a good
effort. Joey down.
He was his quarterback, by the way, so I think
Joey hated thigh pads, knee pads.
3 yards in cloud of dust. Sign me up.
Put Joey down as being against helmets, microwave ovens, progress.
3 yards.
You got smartphones. I'm surprised. You have them rotary.
I just switched over last week. I still had the flip phone.
Hey, the other thing I was a big fan was blocking out on the perimeter. You could see how intense he was. When he would get off at the line of scrimmage, if he were running for a route versus going out to block somebody, very similar in his approach.
And I've said this before. I've said this. I didn't get paid for my blocking.
There you go.
All you got to do, look, you don't have to block a guy to show you.
But that doesn't sound like an old school guy.
When I watch Stewart from Alabama receiver, he's a terrific blocker. I watch Stewart from Alabama block, and I'm like, my gosh, that is good. I want no part of it.
But see, that doesn't sound like an old school guy.
That's not old school at all.
You can't have it both ways.
I just had to get my guy. Hey, running my guy downfield 60 yards is the same as blocking him. Just get him out of the way. He didn't make the tackle. That's all that matters.
You know, I enjoy the fact that there's still some exclusivity. And I was not exactly like you. I was happy with the BCS alignment, not always the formula, though I think it got a bad rap. Time came for 4. As you alluded to, the time will come for 8. But I like the exclusivity of it. The fact that there are some very deserving teams that have a terribly thin margin for error because maybe they had some bad luck in their schedule and teams weren't as good as they thought. It creates a lot of drama week to week in the season.
Which was what we want.
Good for the sport right now.
We didn't want to lose the integrity of the regular season. We talked about that. I think this year's more the exception than the rule, too. I think most of the time there's going to be more drama towards the end. And like last year, how awesome was last year when you woke up and you had Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma, or Ohio State all sitting there vying for that spot? It was awesome. It was fun to watch 4 or 5 games last year at the end of the season and go, who the heck's going to get in? Yeah, like all these teams had something. You were hating on the teams that you didn't want to get in, and you were cheering your team on. So there's a lot of rooting interest in the sport. So I do like it with 4, and I hope it stays at 4 for a little while.
It's great at 4, but imagine if we got to a point where teams like Notre Dame this year, Stanford, Ohio State, and maybe take one of the group of 5 at Houston. Think about those. It's not as if you're really reaching to go get Notre Dame or really grasping for Ohio State or grasping for an Iowa or a Stanford, any of those teams. I mean, imagine it still would keep it, I think, with that last Saturday. No, that's what I'm saying. Right, that's what I'm saying. So I don't think by going to 8, you know, it's going to ruin what we have right now. I think it's eventually going to get there.
It will.
And also, we're not leaving out undefeated teams. You know what I mean? These teams have losses. So if you win your games, then you don't have that conversation. I understand the 8, but I love the 4. I love the exclusivity that you talked about. We're talking about a Stanford team that looks as good as anybody, but they still have 2 losses. Yeah. So the fact that they didn't get in is not just the fact that we have a 14 playoff. It's more to the fact that they have 2 losses, and that's what kept them out.
It's hard to listen to you talk about it now that you want the old system and you don't even care about the...
Dude, you don't like 3 yards in a cloud of dust. You're a defensive lineman. That's your kind of game.
But you're a receiver, and you don't like to block.
He's pretending, just to make his case. Don't worry about it.
No, I didn't say I didn't like to block. I'm just not very good at it.
The last
thing,
made it clear you didn't like to block. Hopefully there's still people watching. I know there's NFL.
Hey, did you see the number from last year? People watched the whole thing.
Okay, so then I just want to send a message. I want to send a message to the coaches and to the athletic directors out there that continue to schedule FCS teams. I want you to remember this year North Carolina and what happened in North Carolina. Despite losing early and going on to win 11 straight, they had an anchor around their ankles that kept them down. And they finally got up into the top 10 going into their last game, but it took 11 straight wins to get up into the top 10. Those 2 FCS wins kept them down versus Michigan State. They play Oregon early in the year. That ends up being a solid win, not only because Oregon ended up being a good team, the willingness to play a team like Oregon is rewarded. So if you're an AD, if you're a head coach, you got to get out of that easy scheduling that Art Briles and Baylor believes in. Hey, if we're undefeated, we're going to get in. You've got to be willing to challenge your team because you're going to be rewarded by the committee at the end.
Reese, go ahead. Tell him. What? Tell me about the North Carolina schedule issue. You let it.
I'm not worried. I know there's reasons for it. I'm just saying that reality is they played 2. Yeah, they played 2 FCS teams. Get the FCS teams off the schedule.
Well, that would be best. It would also be best if all the conferences played 9 games. And, North Carolina originally had a series with Ohio State. Both sides decided it wasn't going to work out for them. At the time, too, you never know how these things are going to go. Because at the time, if North Carolina was trying to get Ohio State was getting North Carolina off its schedule, which they didn't care, they were probably worried about the Tar Heels dragging down their strength of schedule. It's not like they've been good recently, and now they are. So some of this stuff is happenstance, but you get rid of the FCS teams.
Willingness to play Power 5. You don't have to play the elite, but
which Carolina did. North Carolina played 2 Power 5 teams also.
Right. But does
to be fair.
I'm agreeing with you 100%. Also, what about the FCS opponents that live on that? That's their way they continue to make money by playing the big dogs.
Let's find a stipend for them somewhere else and give them the money that they need. We don't need them playing in games in September against Alabamas of the world and Ohio States and whoever else. We need the big-time programs playing teams that we all want to see. The players want to play in them. The fans want to go to games. Nobody wants to be involved in games that are layup.
We got to address that stipend thing, though. We got to address that because they need that.
They do need the money.
They have to survive.
I love FCS. We have friends that played in the FCS. I love their programs. I'm just saying they don't need to be on the field with these other teams that are playing to try to prove that they deserve to be.
They need money.
We need to give them money. I agree with that.
Look at
you can.
I knew that.
Look at
put that one on a team.
I know.
Yes, he did.
One final point about this. There are arguments on both sides. Many of the FCS programs are dependent on getting those checks from the big programs. The case in point about how sometimes it's not mutually beneficial, with the exception of the check. Charleston Southern goes to play Alabama right before Alabama played Auburn. Charleston Southern's had a great year. They're going to the playoff. One of their number one concerns was getting people hurt before they got into their pursuit for a championship. So they kind of held their quarterback out for a little while to make sure he didn't get hurt before they went into a game that they could win.
Very good decision.
It's a balance.
We need uniformity in our scheduling regardless. Everybody needs to have the same schedule.
Step back.
Conference games, conference games.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the check first?
It reminds me of one last thing, and they're rushing us, but I'm going to say this. Sometimes even in a Power 5 game, my buddy Rod Gilmore tells a great story. When he was at Stanford, before they were good, they went out and played one of the great Oklahoma teams. Bill Walsh was coaching. And at halftime, they were getting steamrolled, okay? So they're expecting some kind of real rah-rah speech, and Walsh walks in, looks at him and says, before the second half, gentlemen, protect yourselves out there. So sometimes you never know how a schedule is going to go for both of these teams. We have the Final Four set and the national semifinals all coming up. Nick Saban, we'll hear from him in a little bit. His team going in for the second straight year, the only team to repeat as an appearance in the playoffs. So we'll also have the New Year's Six Bowls coming up. That's in the 3 o'clock Eastern Time hour. And don't miss SportsCenter at night with John Anderson, John Butchergross. They'll wrap up all the action from Week 13 in the NFL, NBA, NHL, and college hoops. Close out the weekend. SportsCenter at night on ESPN.
Welcome back to College Football Playoff Selection Day, presented by AT&T.
Alabama, the 2 seed in the playoff. Season storylines, Jake Coker battling Cooper Bateman for the starting quarterback job, eventually won it. Crimson Tide suffers a loss to Ole Miss, and all those people out there eager to write that dynasty is dead story, got to wait until they lose again before you write that. Derrick Henry emerges as the Heisman Trophy contender. This guy averaged 144 yards against top 50 rush defenses. They're the SEC champions again. Nick Saban with Kaylee Hartung.
Well, Coach, in the second year of the college football playoff, you're the only team with experience in this scenario. What do you take away from last year's experience that will impact this year's?
Well, the first thing I take away is we didn't have much success. But I do think that it was an experience for us because it was a combination of players used to going to bowl games, players used to, in our case, a couple opportunities to go to national championship games, but we never really went to a bowl game that was a playoff game. And I'm not sure we managed that exactly the way we should have in terms of the approach that we all had to it. So, you know, maybe that'll help us a little bit this year.
Coming off an SEC championship game in which a dominant storyline was your relationship with Florida's coach Jim McElwain, a former assistant of yours. Now you find out you'll face another former assistant in Mark D'Antonio at a place you used to coach in Michigan State. What's your reaction to the matchup?
Well, you know, first of all, Mark has done a fantastic job at Michigan State, and we have a tremendous amount of respect for their coaches, their program, and their team. I've had the opportunity to watch them play a couple times. They're very physical and a very, very good team, and I know a very well-coached team because I know Mark well, and it's going to be a tough game for us, and it'll be an interesting matchup, and there'll be a lot of storyline, I guess, about the fact that I used to coach there, and but we have great relationships with a lot of people there, and we have a lot of great friends at Michigan State, and you know, but it's going to be about the players playing the game, not about me or not about Mark or not about my relationships with those people.
Last night after the game in Atlanta, you told us of all the teams you've coached, this team is one you've wanted to succeed more than any others. Why is that?
I think because of the way the year started, there was a lot of question about, does this team really have the right stuff? Are we going to be able to put it together like we need to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish? And there was a time when it didn't look that way, and everybody sort of bought in and did what they needed to do. So when guys do that and make that kind of commitment, you just want to see it come to fruition for them. And, you know, we've had some other teams that I thought maybe should have achieved a little more than they did, but I really was excited about this team having a legacy that they can say they won the SEC championship.
Well, thank you, Coach. We'll see you in Dallas.
Thank you.
First team to win back-to-back SEC championships since the BCS era started back in 1998. So here's the Goodyear Cotton Bowl showdown. It'll be 8 o'clock Eastern time on New Year's Eve. Michigan State and Alabama, Big Ten against the SEC in one semifinal for the second straight year. And Alabama has turned up the pass rush this year, lead the nation in sacks. Michigan State's offensive line was a strong suit coming into the year, had a plethora of injuries over the course of the season, now starting to get a little bit healthier. But now Connor Cook, a little banged up, got a little bit of time, and he's going to be facing a devastating pass rush now. It'll be tough for Michigan State to make sure he doesn't get hit.
I think he needs the time the most. Yeah. Because if you were watching the game last night, Connor Cook has a pretty strong arm. He was floating balls out to the sideline. He couldn't get it there. So I think him having time to rest, get the shoulder right, 26 days, too, to hear how bad they are, and they don't deserve to be on the field with Alabama, and play that underdog role that you've seen D'Antonio play is going to be really awesome for them. I mean,
well, who's saying that, though? Is anybody
everybody.
saying that?
Everybody's going to.
Not everybody.
Okay. How many people are going to pick Michigan State to win this game?
I think that's a different thing from saying how bad they are and they don't deserve to be on the field.
Okay, no one's going to pick you to win the game. How about that? Is that enough?
I would disagree with that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think when you sit and study this game.
Who are you going to pick then?
When I sit and study this game, I would be willing to pick Michigan State if that's the way I feel in the end. I don't look at this game and say, nobody's picking them.
I'm telling you what they're going to say.
That's what they said last year about Ohio State.
Exactly. Too. I mean, Ohio State and Michigan State play same brand of football as far as how physical they can be. I think Alabama's going to be tweaked. I think because of the loss to Ohio State last year in the Sugar Bowl, Nick Saban's going to use that as a carrot and motivation to get them ready for, hey, these guys are physical. It's another Big Ten team that wants a piece of you. So Alabama's going to show up motivated. I just think what David's talking about, Connor Cook, he'll have time to heal. I think his ability to throw the ball with Aaron Burbridge will be some good matchups on the outside. Shelton also on the outside. Kings, they've got some weapons.
the matchup to me that favors Michigan State, or at least gives them a chance to be competitive in this game, is the defensive line and the linebackers against Derrick Henry. If they are determined to stop the run, which is all they believe in, and they can get Jake Coker to 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 8 situations, as we've seen, Bama struggles badly in 3rd and 6 plus. If they get Coker there, Michigan State, I would not just write him off in this game at all.
Connor Cook gets the ball out as well as anybody in the country. And you watch him as a quarterback, and we always talk about NFL ready. You talk about getting back to his step, whether it's 3, 5, or 7, hitting his back foot without a hitch and getting the ball out, does it as well as anybody out there, timing-wise. When you look at Alabama's defense, we always talked about their weakness being in their secondary. Yep. That's changed with this defense because now they're able to get safety. They got 4 guys up front and they're keeping 7 in coverage. No longer does Alabama have to leave their corners on an island as much as they were in the past. They're running some zones, and you can see it is confusing these quarterbacks. A lot of times they're throwing these interceptions into zone coverage as opposed to the man coverage that you normally see from Alabama, and that's why they're so good in the second half, especially of getting interceptions.
See, I disagree with you in one thing because Ohio State had a running quarterback. Stand in the pocket quarterbacks. When was the last one that beat Alabama? When was the last quarterback that stood back in the pocket and picked them apart defensively and beat them?
Garcia, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go back. They struggle when you have a running quarterback.
Would you call Cardale Jones a running quarterback?
He scrambled.
Absolutely.
He scrambled.
He scrambled some, but we've seen Connor Cook scramble, and that's what they switched to J.T. Barrett because he was a better running quarterback. You wouldn't call Cardale a running quarterback.
He ran the ball a lot in that
game. The
game.
reason we were talking about him going so high in the draft was, and that's why they named him 12 gauge because of the arm.
Well, what you're saying, David, when was the last time Alabama lost to a drop-back quarterback? When was the last time Alabama had an offense like this? This offense
last year.
This offense is different than the great Bama teams with Greg McElroy, A.J. McCarron. So when you say when was the last time, it's a different era. This Lane Kiffin offense this year, I give them credit. They've created an identity. This was a big question mark when they broke camp. Who's the quarterback? They went into the Ole Miss game. They played a different guy. They didn't know what they were going to do at that position. No. They finally settled on Coker. It's working. It's effective, but it's not great. It's not a great offense. A.J. McCarron, those offenses were balanced, they were effective, and they were scary because they
lines were better.
Offensive line, they had playmakers on the outside, whether it was a Julio Jones, old school, or Amari Cooper. They had guys that were dynamic. Now, Ridley's getting better, and Stewart's getting good. I mean, very talented. But I don't fear the Bama offense. If you can stop Derrick Henry and load up with 9 in the box, make them throw to beat you, to me, you have a chance to compete. And I think Michigan State has the confidence, the way they're playing these last 4 games, to match up with their defense against that Alabama offense. This is not a mismatch in my mind at all.
Yeah, Michigan State, pedestrian over the course of the season in rush defense, but when challenged against elite running offenses, they've done a great job. They've done a great job against Ohio State, good job against Iowa last night. Even Indiana,
yards.
it's a good run.
I held Iowa to 52 yards.
What did you say, they didn't cross the 50 in the second half?
Second half, they didn't run a play. Iowa didn't run a play in Michigan State territory.
Had the long touchdown pass, almost enough. Spartans make it in to the college football playoff. They'll take on Alabama in one of the semifinals, Clemson, Oklahoma in the other one. Rankings 5 through 25 coming up. That will tell us the New Year's Six Bowl matchups as well. Stick around.
This is College Football Playoff Selection Day, presented by AT&T.
Take a look at our Capital One Bowl Mania preview. One of the national semifinals, Oklahoma and Clemson. As we mentioned earlier, though the Sooners got the final spot, the seedings according to the selection committee, they are number 1 in ESPN's Football Power Index, which is a forward-looking measure, and people in Vegas believe the Sooners are favored, opening as a 2.5-point favorite against the top seed and undefeated Tigers. Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic, Michigan State and Alabama. Crimson Tide, number 1 in the strength of record metric. Of course, the number 4 seed won the national championship last year in Ohio State. Underdogs coming through. Here's another look at the bracket. See, New Year's Eve, don't forget, semifinal games on New Year's Eve this year. Capital One Orange Bowl, Goodyear Cotton Bowl. We'll have the rest of the top 25 according to the selection committee. That's going to be coming up in a matter of moments, as well as the pairings for the New Year's Six Bowls.
This is College Football Playoff Selection Day, presented by AT&T.
Wasn't just the top 4 that this 12-person committee had to put together in order to make sure that the college football playoff was set, and also the New Year's 6 bowls. They're ranked 5 through 25. That will have an impact on the other matchups you will see in the 6 big bowl games that are part of this college football playoff system that you'll see on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. As we get set for this chase for the championship, Heather Dinich covers the college football playoff for us. Heather, and let's start with a couple of things the committee has to take into consideration as they finish up their rankings. The bowls outside of the national semifinals have some alliances with conferences. For instance, the Sugar Bowl is guaranteed to have the Big 12 champion, the SEC champion, unless they're in the playoff. Both of those are in the playoff, Oklahoma and Alabama, so they'll have to fill a couple of spots there. What's been the challenge for the committee in ascertaining how they need to go about this?
Well, that's why the whole top 25 is so important, because as you mentioned, Oklahoma is in the semifinal. So you go to the second ranked team, second place team, I should say, in the Big 12 standings. And because Baylor lost to Texas, they lost a New Year's Six Bowl. That goes now to Oklahoma State because the Cowboys had the tiebreaker over TCU. So Oklahoma State finishes second in the Big 12 standings, and I project they would likely play against Ole Miss, since, as you mentioned, Alabama is obviously in the semifinals. The next highest ranked SEC team should be Ole Miss.
Okay, and the Rose Bowl is in a similar situation with the Big Ten champion Michigan State also being in one of the playoff games. And so now the Rose Bowl, it'll be interesting to see where Ohio State and Iowa stack up, because some indications have been that the Rose Bowl would take the highest ranked Big Ten team, but they do have some latitude to make the choice that they think is best for them, correct?
Correct. You nailed it. All indications and expectations from those conferences and the Rose Bowl are that the Rose Bowl officials will take the next highest ranked Big Ten team behind Michigan State. But that's in the College Football Playoff Selection Committee's rankings, and they are free to rank Ohio State ahead of Iowa at this point if they want. There is no obligation on the part of the Rose Bowl to take the loser of the Big Ten championship game. There is a clause now, though, that if they were to jump the next highest ranked team, it would have to be ranked within 6 spots of that second place team in the Big Ten. So one of the biggest questions that we're waiting to find out right now is which of those teams is ranked higher and headed to the Rose Bowl, Ohio State or Iowa?
Top 4 seem to be pretty easy. Maybe they had to make some decisions in terms of seeding, but is it fair to say that as much or more time spent on getting the rest of these rankings right?
Definitely. That's what Jeff Long said, the selection committee chair. Clearly, there was a debate between Oklahoma and Michigan State with very comparable resumes. But then you get to that 5 to 8 to 10 spot. And he said that was very difficult for the selection committee. But also, you have to go all the way down because the highest ranked group of 5 champion is also guaranteed a spot in a New Year's Six Bowl. I would project that to be Houston, probably hovering around number 18 after winning the AAC championship game. So you have to go all the way down to fill out those New Year's Six Bowl slots, and the committee takes that very seriously because once you get down there, it also gets pretty hard, especially down from 20 to 25, but it counts for every school and every program in the top 25 in one way or another.
All right, Heather, our college football playoff reporter. We are awaiting the release of those rankings coming up sometime just after the top of the hour here on our college football playoff selection day coverage. That's Heather Dinich. She's been following the committee's workings for a while. Top 4, that's all set. Alabama, Michigan State in one semifinal, Clemson and Oklahoma in the other.
College Football Playoff Selection Day is brought to you by Taco Bell, official partner of the student section. Sometimes you gotta live Moss.
Taco Bell and the college football playoff picking up the tab for tickets for 500 fans from each school to the semifinals and national championship game this January, and in the case of the semifinals, December 31st, to enjoy the game from the Taco Bell student section. See how excited those Oklahoma fans are. They're going to enjoy South Florida on New Year's Eve as well. Look at all of the coaching news we've had over the last several days. Les Miles thought to be coaching his last game at LSU. Then he started singing the alma mater, and it turned out long live the hat. He's back after they made the decision to keep him. On the other hand, Mark Richt and Georgia parted ways after 15 seasons, and not too much longer, Mark's flashing that U back at his alma mater as head coach of the Hurricanes. Replacing Richt at Georgia will be Kirby Smart, Alabama defensive coordinator. Expected that Kirby will stay through Alabama's playoff run and then take over on a full-time basis as Georgia head coach, though certainly he will be doing plenty of work in terms of recruiting. And then last night reported that former Florida coach, now Auburn defensive coordinator, is about to become head coach at South Carolina. Will Muschamp getting a second chance. He went 28-21 in 4 seasons as head coach of the Gators from 2011 to 2014. A few other coaching moves. Dino Babers had a terrific run at Bowling Green over the last 2 years, just won the MAC championship. He will try to get it right at Syracuse, which has been challenging for a number of years now, to put it mildly. Clay Helton got the full-time gig at USC, came up short in the Pac-12 title game last night. And Memphis coach Justin Fuente is now Virginia Tech head coach Justin Fuente as he takes over for Hokie legend Frank Beamer at the end of the season. Okay, Jesse Palmer joins us now to talk a little bit about some of these coaching moves. And Jesse, I think perhaps the most surprising one was Will Muschamp getting another chance as a head coach, assuming all of this goes through and the T's are crossed, I's dotted, and all of that type of thing, as quickly as he did after the way it ended at Florida. What's your reaction to it?
I like the hire by South Carolina for Will Muschamp for 2 big reasons. One, I love his familiarity inside the SEC as a player. He has 16 years of coaching experience inside that conference, so certainly he'll understand how to recruit to that school and have familiarity that way. Secondly, I don't know if anyone really denies that Will Muschamp still is one of the better defensive minds in all of college football. He's multiple with the schemes he uses, and he's always been able to recruit NFL talent to that side of the ball. I think the biggest key for Will Muschamp and having success at South Carolina, he's got to nail the offensive coordinator hire, and he has to get it right the first time. That's where he really struggled at Florida. In 4 years, he used 3. And whether it was Charlie Weiss, whether it was Brent Peace or Kurt Roper, they were never able to get any fluidity, any explosive plays established on that side of the football. And you look at the roster and what South Carolina has right now, if the future quarterback is going to be a guy like Lorenzo Nunez or a player like that, then you need to bring an offensive coordinator in with spread principles that can take advantage of those types of skill sets. I think offense will be ultimately what helps determine Will Muschamp's success at South Carolina.
Kirk, what do you think of South Carolina's decision, assuming that all of these reports prove to be true, of going with Will Muschamp as head coach?
I think when a coach gets a second opportunity, he's able to learn from the mistakes that he made in the past, and I think he'll be able to do that. We call these games in college football, and I think some of these coaches either don't care or don't realize how many cameras are on them at all times. And if I were talking to Will Muschamp, I would tell him, I know you're competitive, and I know all these coaches are competitive, but it's one thing to be intense. It's another thing to take it over the top. And I think he has moments where he kind of loses it. And I think as a head coach, you have to be more of an executive and allow your coordinators to make decisions. And there are moments, whether he was, at Auburn or LSU or Florida, where he's got that headset in his eyes. I mean, he's going crazy. And I think when you're the head coach, your team responds to your behavior and how you control yourself. And I would hope that Jesse's dead on. He's got to get a great OC. He's got to get a great scheme. But he'll create a culture. He'll go out and get a great defense. But he's got to chill out.
Yeah, because when you're a head coach, you'd also demand that of other people. And you saw McElwain this year when he came into Florida having to deal with some of those issues. And if he was doing the same thing and he was being crazy and running on the sidelines, jumping up and down, and that's what he's doing, then your players are thinking they're allowed to do it as well. But I think you can't deny Will Muschamp as a recruiter. He's done a great job. He did a great job at Florida recruiting talent. They just definitely stunk offensively. And Jesse still talks about Nunez and who's on the roster. I think when you're a great defensive coach like he is, he wants to have a pro-style offense so he can practice against that every single day. That's usually the way, I think that's the way he'll want to go. At South Carolina, he's not going to get as good as players as he got at Florida. It's going to be a harder place to recruit than it was at Florida. So he's got a lot to prove from what he did at Florida. Florida's an easier place to win. It's an easier place to get talent. So he's getting a second chance. Let's see what he does differently.
I actually don't mind a coach yelling and screaming and being in your face.
Because you're old school.
You're absolutely right. I like Bobby Knight. I like the way Bobby Knight coached. Those things don't bother me. But when we look at Will Muschamp, I don't know what makes you feel like he would be a good head coach. I agree with you. He might be a terrific defensive coordinator. Auburn's defense wasn't great this season. But to say that he's a head coach and he better go get a very good offensive coordinator, I think you're talking about a deficiency in his ability of coaching. I just don't see why South Carolina makes this hire of Will Muschamp.
Well, apparently they tried to get other people.
But they were scrambling.
That's the thing, because they were one of the first vacancies. Remember, Spurrier let them know early that they were gone. Rich Rod didn't want. Apparently they were trying to find somebody to fill the vacancy.
You're saying that's the best that job
look at
South Carolina.
Look how long it was open.
The best they could do is get Will Muschamp.
Look how long it was open, and now it's one of the last ones to get filled.
I think what happened to them, it seemed that they were targeted on Kirby Smart. And then the Georgia job came open, and Kirby preferred that, and it worked out there. And so South Carolina was left sort of regrouping a little bit.
Don't get me wrong, Joey. I love yelling with you. I like yelling, and I like intensity. I don't like crazy. Right. You know, and I think, to me, the kids today, the players today coming out of high school and in college, they're different. There's a different attitude. Pete Carroll's
It's unfortunate that they're different.
Well, I'm not saying coddle them and baby them. Yeah. I'm just saying don't lose your mind. You ever seen his eyes on the sideline?
Yeah, I have.
There's a difference between being mad, like crazy mad, and losing your mind, and being intense and getting in a guy's face and challenging him. I'm all about that. But I'm not a fan of losing your mind like he was just the Auburn-Alabama game a couple weeks ago.
Or Iron Bowl.
He lost his mind.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Doesn't bother me as much.
So you're good with 15-yard penalties, yelling at...
No, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's old school.
Don't get me wrong.
All right.
Don't get me wrong. I don't agree with getting a penalty, and I don't know what was said. I don't know how it transpired. You know, we always see these things. We don't know exactly what was said to these guys, because guys get 15-yard penalties without losing their minds. It's the words that will come out of your mouth. I just don't overreact. And I'm not saying that you guys are wrong. What I'm saying is, the coach being that intense and getting in guys' face, we seen McElwain earlier in the season. I don't have problems with that as much as some people.
He's certainly going to bring some energy, and you can never tell what a man learns, maybe when things don't go the way he intended them to. The first opportunity he got, Muschamp, a year out as a head coach, and apparently on his way to take over at South Carolina as the head coach. A lot of former Saban assistants working their way over in the SEC East these days.
No doubt.
McElwain, Kirby Smart, now Will Muschamp. You see, the national semifinals, Capital One Orange Bowl, Goodyear Cotton Bowl. We will have kickoff times coming up for each of those playoff games. We'll also have the rankings 5 through 25 and the New Year's 6 matchups.
Rankings Reaction is brought to you by Allstate, proud supporters of college football. Are you in good hands?
Crossing the 3 o'clock hour in the East, everybody getting comfortable again, including my buddy Joey Galloway here.
Just warming up, right?
I almost fell out my seat. We're good.
I was walking on Joey's back during the commercial break. He's all good.
Joey Galloway, David Pollack, Kirk Herbstreit, Reese Davis, been joined by Jesse Palmer, Chris Fowler, Heather Dinich, cast of thousands throughout this college football playoff selection day. We've talked a lot about the semifinals and the teams in the top 4, but as we cross the 3 o'clock hour in the East, the committee's work is done now in the rankings 5 through 25, which in many cases will have an impact on who plays in the other big bowl games in the New Year's 6 bowl games. So now let's take a look at the rest of the committee's work, starting at number 25. USC, after winning the Pac-12 South, stays in the rankings at number 25, slipping 5 spots.
What could have been for Tennessee?
Yep.
Games that they were up, they probably could have finished very easily 10-1 or 11-1 this year with the season that they had. Remember, a lot of their guys are back next year.
You know, Kirk, to that point, I don't think I said it on the air. Top 3 teams in the game control metric are in the playoff: Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma. Number 4 in game control, Tennessee.
Yeah, they had to lead through 3.5 quarters in all those games, and they just couldn't hold on.
Yeah, had Alabama also.
Yep.
Had
Arkansas,
had Florida, had Oklahoma.
They had 2 touchdown lead on Oklahoma.
But again, they return a lot next year.
Yep. Good opportunity for Butch Jones. See where the Volunteers are going to wind up in the bowl pecking order. You mentioned Keenan Reynolds, midshipman, making it in the final
We'll
rank.
see them with game day this week.
Absolutely.
In Philly. That'll be
Do I get to go?
Army
Come on
Navy?
aboard. Yeah, come on.
You want to jump in for the Army?
Is that an
Navy?
invite? Yeah.
Come on, yeah.
You're always invited. Why not?
You're not invited.
LSU sticking in the top 20. Oklahoma State losing a couple of games, including Bedlam late in what was a de facto Big 12 championship game. finishes just ahead of Baylor.
Which is significant, obviously.
The injuries at quarterback mounting for Baylor ended up 9-3.
Talking to quarterback, what about Florida, Will Greer? I mean, what has that meant for the Florida offense? Man, they've been really bad.
Back to your point, David, it's not as significant as you might think because the Big 12 gets to establish the order of their bowl teams. So with Baylor losing to Texas, the ranking not as important as the fact that Oklahoma State finished ahead of Baylor in the Big 12 standings. That'll come up as we see the New Year's Six bowl matchups in just a little while. So the Cowpokes of Mike Gundy sitting at number 16. Now let's look at number 15 through 10, and we'll start to get some of these things. TCU staying pat at 11th, and Ole Miss is number 12. Thought Oregon might be a tad higher, but they only moved up one spot. You feel like they're playing as well as anybody.
I really do. There's some great stories there. You look at these teams. What Oregon did in the middle of the season looked like they might be a 500 team. They were able to save their season. Ole Miss has a chance, depending on the bowl game they go to win 10 games. They've only done that once in school history, so that's a great
How many times has Northwestern gotten 10?
Yeah.
That's another great season out of those guys.
And you know what? And how about Pat Fitzgerald, Joey, bouncing back after the whole union thing sort of seemed to take the edge away from the Wildcats, and they regained it. Huge victory against Stanford this year.
TCU with all the injuries. Gary Patterson still finds a way to get to 10-2 this year.
The Ole Miss likely in really good shape to go to the Sugar Bowl. Of course, after the SEC champion Alabama going to the playoff. And then North Carolina, after the tough game against Clemson last night, stays pat. Clemson, number one team in the country, beat all three of those, 8, 9, and 10, while Michigan State at number 3 has victories over numbers 5 and 7.
Not to read between the lines, but we're starting to see some things come into focus as far as the Rose Bowl is concerned there with Iowa 2 spots ahead of Ohio State. Leads me to believe Hawkeyes and Stanford matching up in the Rose Bowl, and looks like an Ohio State-Notre Dame Fiesta Bowl just based on the rankings right there.
That doesn't stink.
No.
I mean, those are 4 teams I said earlier, and we had the debate about 4 teams versus 8 in the playoff. I think those 4 teams that you see ranked 5 through 8, if they were in a 4-team field or an 8-team field, they could win the national championship. All of them. I mean, I don't want to sound Iowa I might be less certain about. The other 3 feel great about. But it shows you what level of game we're going to have in the New Year's Six Bowls, too, Joey.
Yeah, how about the respect that the committee has given Iowa? You know, we talked all year long about who has Iowa beat. And they still didn't beat Michigan State, but the respect that they received for going undefeated, getting into the Big Ten championship game, and playing a game down to the wire to keep them still ranked at number 6 is very impressive by the committee to take a look at this and say, look, we think Iowa's a darn good football team.
I was one of the ones kind of driving that bus the entire season. I had my questions about Iowa all year. It wasn't necessarily about them. It was more about who they've beaten and are they that good. I probably gained more respect in that game, one game, than the previous 12 games that they played because of how they went toe-to-toe with Michigan State. It was like a heavyweight fight. They stood in there, battled in the trenches, held their own, and obviously they impressed me. I walked out of that game watching the part that I was able to see, looking over between the game.
You like my 3 yards in cloud of dust offense at Iowa?
It's what you've been saying about him, but it's the battle of the line of scrimmage, doing all the little things, the love that they have for one another, and we can kid about that. But when a football team really comes together and they're united, it's emotional. You can tell that there's a lot there for that football team. Very deserving of being in that Rose Bowl if they get there against Stanford. And as Big Ten, they lost the championship, but they're still a great team.
Rankings Reaction is brought to you by Allstate, the biggest risers. Michigan State had the most significant one, moving in to the top 4. You see the other teams moving up a couple of spots. The latest injury to a Baylor quarterback had the Bears dropping 5. SC also dropped 5. There are no new teams in the rankings this week. So now let's take a look at the matchups for the New Year's Six Bowl. This is also part of the playoff initiative. And the Rose Bowl game presented by Northwestern Mutual, which will be on New Year's Day, 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Stanford against Iowa, and Iowa going to the Rose Bowl for the first time in a quarter century. I know they wanted to go to the playoff, but black and gold, if game day's any indication, will represent.
I think there'll be 60,000 Iowa fans. If Stanford gets bored with the Rose Bowl, Iowa will fill that stadium up on their own. They'll bring 100,000 if they need to. That is a major coup for the Hawkeyes and Kirk Ferentz, and well-deserved based on the year that they had this year.
It's your kind of game right here, Chief.
You're absolutely right. There's going to be 2 tight ends on the field. There's going to be some fullbacks, receivers blocking. Gotta love the style of this game. Going to be blocking.
Well, one more thing really interesting. Last comment. Ohio State and Iowa played Michigan State about the same. So, I mean, it's not really. I mean, Michigan State dominated Ohio State probably the whole game, so Iowa played them just as tough. So I don't have a problem with Iowa being in the 5.
And Iowa
I know people are going to complain about
Iowa getting to the Big Ten championship game and then losing the committee, keeping them above Ohio State. That's why they ended up at the number 5 spot. Yeah. They didn't hurt themselves in Indianapolis.
Right. Well, it's a reasonable thing to do. It gives you a traditional matchup in the Rose Bowl, and the Hawkeyes a very deserving team after having a terrific run and coming within an inch or two in the stop, and L.J. Scott reach.
How about the option by Connor Cook?
Yeah, that's right, 4th and 2. They could have stopped Cook. That would have been it. Been a great challenge for both of these teams, and a Heisman Trophy candidate going for the Cardinal.
That'd be a great
Christian
game.
McCaffrey. That'll be a lot of fun. And so too will this, the nightcap on New Year's night. Big 12 versus SEC, Oklahoma State against Ole Miss. Rebels going to a New Year's Six Bowl for the 2nd time in 2 years. They were running on fumes, and they got trounced by a better team in TCU last year. Now they get another shot at the Big 12.
You know what? In these kind of matchups right here, you love them because you know fans will carry this argument. Big 12 against the SEC. Everyone wants their shot at the SEC teams. Huge chance for Oklahoma State to make a statement for the Big 12.
And just to remind you, what we talked about with Heather Dinich a little while ago, the Sugar Bowl has a deal where it's a Big 12 versus the SEC, and when you don't have the champions available, if they go to the playoff, you replace them with teams from that conference. Big 12 had Oklahoma State in line because they finished 2nd after the Baylor loss to Texas, and Ole Miss, the highest-ranked team.
How about Texas and Charlie Strong? Blown out against Notre Dame, shut out in Ames against Iowa State, and they beat OU, and then yesterday they knock off Baylor. And Baylor at home playing against Texas with a right to get to the Sugar Bowl, and they lose, opens up the door for Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy.
Stinks when you have to play your 14th string quarterback. That's
well, he's not really a quarterback, which Baylor was basically left running the old school single wing without the passing. Absolutely.
Yes, please. Sign me up.
Right after College Game Day on New Year's morning, which will come from Pasadena, we're going to lead you right in to this beauty. Notre Dame and Ohio State, the Irish, just a grand total of 4 points away from a perfect season against a couple of really good teams, one that's going to the Rose Bowl, one that's in the playoffs.
This comes directly from the Bear. Remember, for Notre Dame, in 4 BCS games, they were 0-4, losing by an average of 25 points a game. And the last time we saw them on the big stage, they were embarrassed in the championship game by Alabama 42-14.
That will get your New Year's Day started with the Battle Frog Fiesta Bowl. New Year's Day, 1 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN, and watch ESPN. I don't know if I could be more excited about
That's a great one.
That is a terrific game.
What a way to start your day. Game day, and we throw it to Tempe.
Here we go with that game day stuff.
And you're coming
I'm not there. I mean,
you're coming off the semifinals the night before, too. I mean, that's like football overload. And then the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which will start New Year's Eve, which is now part of this college football playoff tradition. Noon Eastern Time on ESPN. It'll be Houston, the highest-ranked team from the group of 5 conferences. Tom Herman's team only with the single loss against Connecticut. They will take on Florida State. The Seminoles with the improbable loss, one of the crazy plays of the season to Georgia Tech, and then came up with a loss to Clemson.
Think about when Florida State lost from Jameis Winston and everything, all the other players that they lost. A new era, considered a down year, 10-2. Chance to get to the Peach Bowl. That's a pretty good year.
How about Houston?
Jimbo Fisher.
Too.
Oh, yeah.
The American having a chance to make another statement. Memphis beating Ole Miss early in the year. Now we got a chance. Houston get a chance at Florida State. Think if Temple would have knocked off Notre Dame. I mean, the American Conference, the respect they received this season can only get better if Houston goes in and beats Florida State.
Greg Ward Jr. is a beast.
He is.
He's one of the best playmakers in college football if you haven't seen him for Houston.
One of those mental games. Houston will show up like it's the Super Bowl against Florida State. Can Jimbo Fisher get his team to respect Greg Ward and the offense from Houston, because they better show up ready to go? They'll get embarrassed.
National title 2 years ago. Last year in the college football playoff. Now they're in the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Better show up ready.
Yeah, people don't like to admit that that's a factor.
It is.
Unless you're involved your team.
Yeah,
it's
watch
a factor.
The games. It's a big factor.
It's a factor.
This one happened last year was a factor in that game.
Yep.
OU versus Clemson.
Here are the kickoff times now for the semifinals. Capital One Orange Bowl will be the first semifinal game, 4 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN, available on the Watch ESPN app. That will be on New Year's Eve. Oklahoma and Clemson. So the top seed will get the early start this year, as the undefeated Tigers will take on the Sooners in the postseason for the second straight year. And then you will ring out 2015 with a slugfest between Sparty and the Crimson Tide, potentially the Heisman Trophy winner Derrick Henry against the Michigan State defense. We'll see how that shakes out next Saturday night when the Heisman's announced. But the Goodyear Cotton Bowl will pit Michigan State against Alabama, and that will be the nightcap on New Year's Eve. Pleased to welcome back in for the second time this afternoon Jeff Long, who is the chairman of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Jeff, we spent a lot of time talking about the top four. What went into the committee's evaluation? I know the Rose Bowl had some latitude in terms of picking a team, but in terms of leaving Iowa in place and putting them in position to go to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, as you guys said it, we really thought Iowa really proved more in that loss than maybe they did throughout the rest of their schedules. I think the committee was very thoroughly impressed by the way they played in that game, and as you guys said, very close loss with an arm stuck out with a football across the goal line to lose that game. So, you know what, holding them 5 was a strong sentiment of the committee, and as you guys do know, the Rose Bowl does get a selection there, and they chose Iowa, which made for a great matchup with Iowa and Stanford in the Rose Bowl.
Jeff, I know that every season has a unique set of circumstances unlikely to be duplicated, but in terms of finding what's instructive from a committee's decisions, what can we take from the fact that two-loss Stanford finished a spot above a once-beaten Ohio State, given the fact Stanford was a conference champion, Ohio State was not?
Yeah, I think there's two things there. One, that, again, we use it a lot, we say it a lot, but the body of work. I think Stanford's number of wins they have compared to Ohio State's full body of work, you know, is impressive in Stanford's favor. And then in this case, you know, conference championship, having an additional game against the top-level team and a win made that difference for putting Stanford ahead of Ohio State. But again, very, very close.
What was the most difficult part of the process in terms of stacking up these teams 5 through 25 as you went through the voting process? What caused the most intense debate?
You know, there's a couple of teams, and you guys can look through it. One's Northwestern Michigan. The other one is a Florida LSU, and where they have head-to-heads. But there's a win differential there, one more win, one less loss, that really caused difficulty for the committee. You know, we looked strongly at that head-to-head, and you know, in the Northwestern Michigan case, it's a significant head-to-head win by Michigan, but they're one spot below Northwestern. So there's a couple of those throughout the 25 that I do really think caused the committee the most consternation. We really struggle with teams that won head-to-heads but were ranked lower.
Well, what is it specifically? Is there a point in that room where people step up and say, hey, wait a minute, we can't do this. This was a decisive victory, particularly in the example you cited, Michigan against Northwestern?
Yeah, absolutely. Those points are made, and I will tell you there's committee members that felt very strongly about that. But again, you know, unique to our process, after we argue and debate and make our points, we then vote. And the vote was very close, but in that case, Northwestern edged out Michigan.
When you started seeding teams, putting them in New Year's Six bowls, was it an easy process? Because it seemed like that most of the at-large berths fell in line, and there weren't as many of them available this year as there was last year, too.
That's right. There's not as many. And again, the committee, the first 2 years have really leaned on getting the matchups, the highest-ranked matchups, and I think that's why you see that Ohio State matchup in the Fiesta Bowl against Notre Dame. So getting the matchup higher-ranked teams, we feel generally like that's what the fans want to see, and that's what guided us in that process.
Hey, Jeff, it's Kirk. Just out of curiosity,
hi, Kirk.
How are you? Out of curiosity, how late did you guys look at this last night, and how early did you guys start again this morning?
Yeah, we went well after midnight. I think somewhere 12:30. Some stayed up and continued to talk a little bit in sidebars after 12:30 last night, and then we had breakfast at 7:30 and started back at 8 o'clock. So we put a lot of time into it. But again, the preparation the committee did is without question. They were very well prepared and very thorough in their evaluations.
How much changed between the end of Saturday night and when you reconvened on Sunday?
Some, but not a great deal in comparison to, ranking that top 25. Not a great deal change. There were few votes that resulted in maybe a one-position change in the ranking.
When you look at this now, Jeff, there are people who say, particularly with some of the matchups that we'll see in the Rose Bowl and also in the Fiesta Bowl, that the climate is right to expand this playoff. What's your reaction to that?
Well, we love 4. We think 4 has been incredible. Look at these matchups we have in the New Year's 6 bowl games, and we just think that 4 has been the right number. And besides the selection committee, that's not in our purview. That's really the decision of the management committee. But we're very happy with 4.
But Jeff, we appreciate your work, appreciate your candor and what the committee undertook in ranking these 4 teams, and then the top 4 teams for the playoff, and then the rest to set up the New Year's 6 Bowl. Jeff, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Reese. Pleasure to be with you.
All right, Jeff Long, who the chair of the selection committee, takes on what is often a thankless job in terms of having to explain the committee's decisions and capture in very short sound bites what are obviously lengthy discussions and the product of a whole lot of research among all of those 12 people on the staff. Now, you're old school. We had to drag you into having 4. But you have some really great bowl matchups outside the playoff now in the New Year's 6, Joey.
I agree with you, and I love the games, the way they're set up. And it's interesting to me, the committee didn't punish teams for losing in their conference championship games. North Carolina was 10 coming in, they're still 10. Iowa, Michigan State just flip-flop spots. So they didn't punish these teams, and I agree with that. I don't think these teams should be punished for losing in the conference championship game. But these games that we have, boy, outside of the playoff, terrific. I mean, you can't get any better than the matchups that we have.
Not only did they not punish, I like that they rewarded. And I say that because Stanford gets rewarded. And I think in the future, when we're having this debate of who's number 4, we need to look at this. Stanford's ahead of Ohio State because they were champions. Mm-hmm. Remember, Stanford had another loss. So they forgave a loss, and they rewarded Stanford. So moving forward, I think we can see that when you're a champion in your league, it's going to mean something. It meant something in the final rankings, and it will mean something in the future moving forward.
Not only were they champions, but they had better wins. If you look at their body of work, even with the 2 losses, Stanford is deserving of being exactly where they are, not only as Pac-12 champions, but because of playing teams like Notre Dame and Northwestern. And I know they lost to Northwestern, but it's a football team that was willing to go out there and play 9 conference games, Notre Dame, Northwestern, and a Pac-12 championship game. So I'm with you. And I agree with Iowa being up ahead of Ohio State. I know a lot of Ohio State fans are going to be frustrated. They think they should be in the Rose Bowl. But Iowa, after an undefeated season, they went into Indianapolis, played a great Michigan State team, a team that beat Ohio State, and they went toe-to-toe and came this close to beating Michigan State. And the reward from the Rose Bowl is they get a trip to go out to Pasadena. I think it's great for Iowa, great for Kirk Ferentz and that program. And I think that's the bowl game. There are a lot of them. Ohio State, Notre Dame's a great one. And I love that Rose Bowl matchup with David Shaw and Stanford going up against the Hawks.
And you've talked about this many times from your background growing up in the Midwest. Being able to go to Pasadena, play in that game on that stage, which is the grandest in all of the sport. There is no better setting on the planet to play a football game than Pasadena, California in the Rose Bowl. Iowa gets that opportunity, and so too does Stanford. And it'll be a great matchup for sure. And that's still meaningful.
Oh my gosh! You grow up in the Big Ten, and it gets dark at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And it's I'm telling you, there's snow. You got the fireplace going, and you tune into the broadcast of the Rose Bowl, and it's like all of a sudden,
warms your heart.
Oh my gosh! It's like it's perfection. There's nothing better than living in the Big Ten region, and your team gets to the Rose Bowl, and you tune into that game. Yeah, it's the best.
Quarter century since Iowa's been there, and I'm sure they will turn out in force for that showdown against Stanford, and I believe too. Don't get caught up in the favorites. What do we have? New Year's 6 last year, including the playoffs. 5 of the 6 underdogs won last time. There were many plays that shaped these rankings, shaped the playoffs, shaped the year. We'll count down the top 10 of those when we continue in our college football playoff selection day. And Jimmy V Week, we're in the midst of it. You know the Jimmy V Week benefits the V Foundation for Cancer Research. V Foundation founded by ESPN and the late Jim Valvano in 1993. Funds research for all cancers, including pediatric cancer, prostate cancer, and breast cancer. We hope that you'll join us in the fight against cancer. It affected all of us here, friends, colleagues, family members. Their fight, your fight is our fight. We hope that you'll find it in your hearts to donate at jimmyv.org or 1-800-4-JIMMY-V. The Jimmy V Classic will be at Madison Square Garden. Tuesday night, you see the 2 basketball matchups. It'll be on ESPN starting at 7 o'clock Eastern Time.